From Kern Government Television, welcome to this week's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting, originating from the County Administrative Center located at 1115 Truxtun Avenue, Bakersfield, California. Kern County's vision is to create and maintain a customer-centered county government designed to garner the confidence, support, and trust of the people we serve. Today's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting will convene momentarily.
Okay, board to reconvene. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Supervisor Peters.
Here.
Supervisor Scribner.
Here.
Supervisor Maggard.
Here.
Supervisor Couch.
Here.
Supervisor Perez. Oh, I heard here from the back.
She's coming. Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Tuesday, October 26th, 2 p.m. meeting of the Kern County Board of Supervisors. We'll first hear from County Counsel Margot Razon for a report taken on action in closed session.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. You met on items number 78 and 79. However, there is no reportable action.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we will consider the consent agenda. All items listed with a CA or C above the items are considered to be routine and non-controversial by county staff. The CA represents the consent agenda for the Board of Supervisors, while the C represents the consent agenda for the Kern Sanitation Authority and Ford City Taft Heights Sanitation District. Consent items will be considered first and may be approved by one motion. If members of the public wish to comment or ask questions regarding an item on the consent agenda, they may do so prior to a vote being taken. Members of the board may remove any item from the consent agenda, and it will be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board concerning the item before action is taken. Members of the public may also comment on any closed session items. At this time, I'll read the consent agenda item numbers for the Board of Supervisors, and that is item 5 on page 2, items 6 through 8 on page 3, 9 through 15 on page 4, 17 through 22 on page 5, 23 through 25, as well as 27 through 29 on page 6, items 30 and 32 through 38 on page 4 or page 7, and lastly, items 39 through 41 on page 8. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak regarding the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, are there any members of the board that would like an item removed for discussion? Okay.
Motion on consent?
Okay, could we get a motion on the consent and to adjourn as the Board of Supervisors and reconvene as Kern Sanitation Authority?
What'd you say?
Thanks. Is there a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Okay, we are now sitting as the Kern Sanitation Authority and will consider the consent agenda, which includes item C1. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak regarding this item? Okay, seeing none, would any members of the board like to make a motion to approve and adjourn as the Kern Sanitation Authority and reconvene as the Ford City Taft Heights Sanitation District?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you. We are now sitting as the Ford City Taft Heights Sanitation District and will consider the consent agenda, which includes item C2. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve and adjourn as the Ford City Taft Heights Sanitation District and reconvene as the Kern County Board of Supervisors.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
All right. We have reconvened as the Kern County Board of Supervisors and will now consider item 3, public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on this agenda, but under the jurisdiction of the board. Board members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask questions for clarification, make referrals to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. Also, the board may take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. Please state and spell your name before making your presentation. Is there anyone that would like to address the board?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name is Bianca Santoyo. I'm Byanka, Santoyo, Santoyo. I am a community organizer for Center Race Poverty in the Environment. I'm here again as many weeks ago in regards to the notification that we've been working on. I've been trying to reach Leticia's office, still no outreach, to set up a meeting. We had a meeting a couple weeks ago with the Kern County Ag Commissioner in our regular AB 617 meetings, and he told us straight out to everybody, even state agency, he's not gonna be working with us in any type of notification. That is alarming because he's a public official. He's there to represent community health, and yet he's still dismissing the work and effort that community leaders have been working for more than 3 years. There's been a huge study from UCLA of cancer clusters on our children in rural communities, and especially here in Kern. That is alarming because there's been actually a research coming out, there's been monitor coming out of all these exposures that residents have to deal with on a daily basis, yet no notification has been at all as a discussion with the Kern County Ag Commissioner. We're here to plead to you guys in supporting making this possible. We have everybody in place, even the city of Shafter ready to go. They've already, in their SB 1000, they even allocated some time and effort to make this notification possible, and nothing has been done. There's another community, the community of Arvin and Lamont, that has the AB 617, and they're dealing with the same issue, having the Ag Commissioner to sit down on the table, and that is alarming because he's a public official and not wanting to respond to public effort and to public leadership. So we're here as community members, as residents, as EJ advocates to push for this to happen. So thank you.
Can I say something?
Thank you, Supervisor Perez.
I understand that you did talk to Christian in my office and that we were going to get together after you spoke with Supervisor Couch's office. Have you been able to reach him? Does he respond to you at all?
I haven't been able to reach David Couch. Personally, I haven't reached out to David Couch, but that's my second step to reach out to David Couch.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak under public presentations?
Good afternoon. Dennis McLean, MC, capital L-E-A-N. I've spoken here a few times on the mandates, and I want to speak more about that since we've had some recent news that's been exposed to us citizens. Some of these examples of the current administration that have been lying to the American citizens examples are the recent CDC find Dr. Fauci not telling us about gain of functions. He's been lying to us all this time. And of course, he's the top government official. What is the public supposed to do about this? As you guys, as local of administrators, I think you guys need to make a stand for the citizens of this county and oppose these mandates that are made up by these liberal politicians. I think it's, you guys took an oath to the Constitution, and I don't believe lying is the thing to do that's on the Constitution. So I look up to you guys as leaders, and I wish you guys would get together and take care of this county, lift some of these mandates as far as the schools and the vaccines. So I wish you well, and I hope you guys would do something. It seems like now it's, something's coming up. Now we've got the problem with stuff coming into the docks, and now we've got, the immigration stuff still going on. They've been lying to us about taking the migrants and spreading them all over the county. And guess what? They're not vaccinated. They're not even checked. What the hell kind of government is that? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public speakers? Okay. Seeing none, we'll now move to item number 4, board member announcements or reports. And I'd like to begin with a presentation by Supervisor David Couch.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for indulging me for just a minute or two. We all have folks on our staff that work for us that help us do what we do every single day. And I'm very thankful for the people on my staff. I know you feel the same way about yours. One of the people that I get to work with every day is named Jesus Perez. Get over here, Jesse. I call him Jesse. Others do too. But he did something pretty special recently, and I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that. Not only is he on the District 4 office staff, but he's also the chairman of the board of the Bear Mountain Park and Rec District that serves the Lamont and Arvin area. And recently, you all know what CSAC is. Supervisor Perez, you've served on the board there. You all have been involved at the California State Association of Counties. You also are aware of what the League of Cities is. It's an advocacy group for cities. Well, there's also the California Association of Park and Rec Districts, which is tantamount to CSAC and the League of Cities. And recently, Jesus was elected to the executive board of the California Park and Rec District for the state of California. And yeah. Not only is it kind of neat that he was elected, but he is the first person from, as far as we can tell, and we've researched this, from the San Joaquin Valley to ever serve in that capacity as well. So I wanted to take just a moment today and give Jesus, who I call Jesse, and others do as well, a certificate of recognition. I just want to read that into the record and present it to you, Jesse, and give you an opportunity to say a word or two. And it's a certificate of recognition. It's in recognition and congratulations on your election to the California Association of Recreation and Park Districts Board, and for exemplary public service and civic contributions to the community in Kern County, dated today, signed by all the members of the Board of Supervisors. Congratulations on your election. He's been to one meeting so far. You go to your second meeting this weekend, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, here you go. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Supervisor Couch, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Supervisors of Kern County. I really wanted to take this opportunity to dedicate this recognition and congratulations to my father, who passed away recently, whom was a resident of Lamont and extremely proud of his community, and has brought his family, my family, forward with a strong sense of community service and a lot of pride, and really focused on our education as far as being the reason why he woke up at 4 in the morning to go to work and would return home at 6. So being from Lamont, this is just amazing, and it's an honor to be able to serve my community. I just have just really quick about the CARPD, the California Association of Recreation and Parks District. The best way to describe it is as a collective voice of California's recreation and parks districts, not only in Sacramento with the legislature, but with other state regulatory bodies and municipal associations. We advocate for education. Within local government in order to improve park and recreation services throughout California. And today I would be remiss if I didn't mention that in the 4th District, we actually have 6 out of the 8 recreation and parks districts in Kern County in our district. So it's a unique opportunity to be able to serve within the 4th District office, as well as through my service with Bear Mountain Recreation and Parks District as a chairman. I've been chairman there for 4 years, going on to my 5th year, God willing. And I would also be remiss if I didn't thank the leadership of our Planning and Natural Resources Director, Lorelei Oviat, for her leadership in recently working with all of the Parks and Recreations districts here in Kern County collectively. I think that was kind of a thing that was nicely targeted. It was perfect time for that to come together, because 4 out of the 8 currently receive Quimby fees. And I think 2 out of the 8 currently have impact fees in their ordinances or the ability to collect those impact fees. So thank you for this opportunity. And again, I wanted to just dedicate this to my father, Jesus Guadalupe Perez Campos, and I love you, Dad. Thank you.
Real quick, Jesse, I just wanted to say that, that's awesome that you've been able to continue building on your dad's legacy and keep that growing and serving your community. So that's fantastic. Keep up the good work. And I know Supervisor Perez would like to say something as well.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I got my start off on a little body like this that nobody had ever heard of. No offense, because it's very special, but I remember nobody really knowing any of these bodies I would first sit on. And those are the places where you really make such important relationships and you learn so much, especially best practices that are occurring around the state and all over the country, because these are the associations that are promoting best practices. And you just learn so much in the process. So hats off to you, kudos, great job, Supervisor Couch. And for those in the crowd who, are looking for some formal opportunities, there are lots of boards like this. There are lots of commissions like this. My office can provide a list to you of openings. If you're interested, apply. It's a simpler process than you think. Obviously, you got to know the right people, and it's helpful to understand how these things work and how the tables or the chairs are moved around. But nonetheless, please consider it, because a lot of folks here I see that are passionate and want to be a bigger part of their community, and these are the places where you start to get known, right? Where people start chatting about you and wondering who you are, and those in themselves provide new opportunities to build relationships and get your name out there and to know a subject matter so that you can become an expert in an area or multiple areas, which is ideal. So this is a very, I think, incredible moment. I'm very excited for you. And also to the others that are here, there are other opportunities like this. Please think about it and get to know a subject and get to know the other people in this community who care about those subjects too, because you will grow exponentially and faster than you ever could on your own. So thank you, and congrats to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Supervisor Perez. I think that's the legacy that my father left for us, a very rich legacy of community work and service. And that was the first time I met Supervisor Perez was outside of my front yard, front side of the front of the street. Basically, you were walking the streets in your plea for votes for this your first election onto the supervisors, the Board of Supervisors. And through my community service, I've gotten to know Ryan Alsop. My father introduced me to David Couch. And I think his greatest legacy is to leave not only his home and our family, but the neighborhood of Lamont and our neighbors better than the way how he found it back in 1970s. And so, thank you.
Well, I love it. You're going to learn how to chair a meeting. You're going to learn about agendas, minutes. I mean, that's stuff that just sort of flies over your head when you're not in the mix. You've got to know those things. You've got to know the rules of a game you want to play. And this is the way that you do it in a qualitative manner. And, you're lucky you have good mentors and folks linking you up. That's a blessing in itself, too. But please remember my office. We're eager to place people that have not traditionally been in positions of power in a place where you can have some influence and learn to harness your power and your passion in a way that's really, really can be, quite magical. I mean, I just believe in it so much. So I'm very excited for you and eager to see where you'll go.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other board member announcements or reports? Seeing none, we will now consider item number 16 under the CAO's office, and that is a proposed Advanced Kern Economic Development Incentive Agreement for Plant Prefab, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $6,600,000 effective October 26, 2021.
Thank you,
I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm going to hand this over to Teresa Hitchcock to handle. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Peters, members of the board. I'm Teresa Hitchcock. The item before you today is the fourth incentive agreement to come before the board since Advanced Kern was adopted. The tax rebate recipient is Plant Prefab Inc., or PPI. The company designs and prefabricates custom, high-quality, and sustainable single and multi-family homes and expects to create between 50 and 440 new full-time jobs at an average annual salary of $53,000 per year. PPI will make approximately $10 million in capital investments at its project site located in the Tejon Industrial Complex. The total incentive for this project is worth up to a maximum of $6.6 million in rebated property and sales tax over the next 3 to 30 years. The exact duration will depend on the total number of new jobs created and the assessed values enrolled by the assessor's office, and also the volume of sales attributed to the facility. Based on an economic impact analysis, the indirect and induced economic benefits to the greater Kern County economy as a result of this project are as follows. Roughly 0.78 new jobs will be created for each of the 50 jobs, at a minimum brought by PPI. That amounts to approximately 39 new jobs created in the economy at large. The additional 39 jobs would be worth an estimated $3.1 million in indirect and induced salaries and wages each year. The additional 39 jobs would produce an estimated $9.5 million in indirect and induced sales for the local economy each year. At a minimum, PPI must create 50 jobs by June of 2023. The indirect and induced figures could increase substantially if the company realizes its full growth potential and creates the maximum 440 new full-time jobs. PPI has a stellar track record as an eco-friendly company and one that emphasizes the well-being of its employees. A representative, Josh Tech of PPI, is here to provide a brief presentation about the company at this time.
Great, thank you.
First of all, I'd like to thank the board for allowing me to speak today and also entertaining our proposal for the new proposed factory in Kern County. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so guys, first of all, I put together actually quite a bit of information here. I'm going to kind of skim over it for time's sake, and then but I want to have something to make sure you had something to take with you and look at after. So, okay. Okay, so first of all, a little bit of history of the company. First of all, we are a mission-driven company. I mean, it's twofold. Number one, it's sustainable housing, healthy for the occupants, and also to address the home crisis, right? Right now, it's hard to get, buildings built in time for, as you see, homelessness getting better, quality of life, those types of things. So with our building system, we actually can do things much faster at better quality than you can do on the site. So that's kind of the moral of where we come from. Essentially, how it started, our founder, Steve Glenn, started Living Homes, which was basically a design firm back in 2006. Again, it was focused on residential projects and for sustainable construction. And what he learned was, as they were working with different factories, it was very hard to get the business done, right? So they would get designs done, but because there was the housing crisis, there was backlog, there was all these things that, it just couldn't scale, right? So what Steve did was he started in 2016, he started Plant Prefab, right? So Plant Prefab was just that, taking the patented building system, which is, it's a way we take custom structures. So the idea is we're not saying you have to buy this or have to buy this. You bring us your designs, it can be single family, multifamily, and we engineer them so it can be built off-site. So as the site work is being done, we're building that through the factory, okay? All right. All right, I'm not going to go through this. This kind of just goes about our company, but the big thing I want to focus on here is we have 6 core values, right? Of course, safety first, lifetime quality. That's just not just quality of the product, but the quality of the relationship with the client. Lifetime clients, Earth Day every day is a big one for us. The golden rule, and less is more. So we like to kind of live by these in everything that we do. In terms of leadership, I'm not going to go through this, but the idea here is I wanted to show you guys that we have a world-class team coming from many different industries to make this project come to success. All right, so we have people from Apple and automotive, construction. I also brought John McElroy with us. He's sitting right here. He is the head of our engineering group, so he's doing process and product. He's coming from one of the best home builders and panelized home builders in the country. Okay, so just want to make sure you guys are aware we have a very capable, world-class team that is going to be making sure this project takes off and without a hitch. Okay. Capacity. So essentially right now we've completed a Series A round to get our first factory built in Rialto, and we've just completed Series B. Series B essentially was to fund this project. All right. If you look at controlled growth, we started the Rialto factory, which is in the Inland Empire, in 2016. This year we opened a second factory because we're at capacity. We were basically busting at the seams already. It's in Ontario. And then of course, this is for our third factory. Now the difference is now, so we build our product at a small scale in these two factories at the moment. This new factory will now be state of the art, with automation, high class material handling, those types of things that we can scale in a factor of 20 times the size of what we're doing now. Okay, so that's kind of what I have here. The project is essentially, our phase one is about $10 million investment, not counting the building. That's important. That's just in equipment. The building is on top of that. All right. We can, depending on how we ramp in volume, we could get up to about 440 full-time jobs. We anticipate within the first year of ramping to full volume, we get into the 100 to 150. Of course, wages paid above living wage. And of course, we have a great benefit package to make sure we take care of our employees. Again, as a mission-driven company, the sustainability of the people at workforce is just as important as the product. Right? Again, capabilities, the thing about us is we're not set on one thing. We want to make sure that we are attacking the entire residential housing market. So we do single family, we do ADUs for the new zoning that are allowed to have those on the lots. We do multifamily, and we do single family multi-unit. So a lot of these that we do a development, right? So we can kind of take that scales of economy to and obviously with Tejon Ranch, we know there's a lot of homes that need to be built. We're hoping to be a big part of that. Okay. Again, good thing about us is we're not just a builder of homes. We take it from day one is from design. We think our power is in design. Like we take what we say, use your creativity, and then what we do, we take that and we design it into the best way to produce it, right? In terms of transportation, site access, all those types of things. We do our own engineering, the prefabrication in the factory, and then the manufacturing of the parts. This is kind of important just so you guys can see what we actually are doing. This is our patented building system. So what we do, there's different ways to prefabricate things and to get that kind of mindset of like we're building just small, cheap things. No, what we actually do is we take a fully structural intent home, fully designed, passes Title 24, and again, with the sustainability in mind, we are designing well above Title 24 requirements. We then figure out what the best way to break this up into prefabricated components are. You can see some of this, we pretty much call our plant panels and plant modules, and those can be in an infinite amount of customizational ways, and then we break that up for what the project looks like. So this is kind of an example of how that works. Okay, I'm gonna glance over this real quick, but again, benefits, we feel that we win in terms of quality, we feel we win in terms of labor, inspections, schedule, budget, service, and health and sustainability. We feel that our method, if you look here in the detail, we win in every one of those categories. Okay. These I'm going to go through quick. It's a lot of information here, but we want to focus on, we do healthy and sustainable homes. You can see our performance from 2020. We did make a commitment to be carbon neutral. As Amazon's one of our investors, and they had announced originally they wanted to be by 2030. They've since revised that to 2040. So we, in turn, as one of their big investments, we had made a commitment to be carbon neutral by 2028. Now we did do that last year already on our current scale, right? So we will be looking to, once we launch this new facility, to be able to make it carbon neutral as well. Okay. Same thing for operations. We look at people, places, and how we're doing that. Again, the note on the bottom that we already achieved carbon neutrality. Same with the supply chain. We look at supply chain as an integral part of our process. Local suppliers first. How do the suppliers treat their employees? We have a code of ethics that we sign with our supply base, those types of things. So we want to push our goals and values to our supply base as well. And then same thing with employees. We look at diversified workplace, making sure benefits are in place, a mix of the work, and these are kind of some of our statistics that we have around that. Okay, safety is a big one for us as well. We like to kind of brag a little bit that we're well, because of the way of our nature of our beast, that we're doing construction, but under a roof. People come to the same place every day. It's safer. They're out of the heat. They have a nice cafeteria to go to. You get better quality because the same guys are coming to the workplace. Our safety record is miles above what the industry is right now. Okay. And then I have a slide in here about becoming a B corporation. So B corporation is important to us. I mean, that's basically saying that you're abiding by the rules as a corporate citizen, right? So it's terms of what you're doing for employees, how you manage your interface with the local community, right? So we're looking to extend this also to the community where we build our new factory at as well. Okay. Okay, any questions? I know I went through that fast, but there's a lot of information there to make sure that everyone has the information on our what we're looking to do. Any questions on the project at all, or?
Supervisor Maggard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Tick, thank you for your presentation. Beautiful product. The homes look good, and to be a great corporate citizen and being a B Corp, that's quite an achievement and an aspiration. So, congratulations on that. What is the absolute least expensive, smallest unit you can build?
That is a loaded question because since we are custom,
I don't mean to load it up for you.
I'll be honest with you, it's low because we pride ourselves on trying to build it as inexpensive as possible. And that's part of the idea of this new factory is because we can pass on the scales of instead of of using the machines for a large part of that. But it also depends on, again, we're not saying you have to buy from our catalog. We have some standard homes, but we actually don't. We do whatever you want, right? So if you bring that to us, we'll find the best way to build it. I mean, and that depends on finishes and things like that. So
we need transitional housing for tons of homeless people we're taking off the street. And we'll come back and talk to you about.
Yeah, no, good example.
You might be able to help us with that.
We did win a grant from LA County on our Nest product, which is an affordable housing multifamily unit, which we're working on now with Brooks and Scarpa architect firm. So that's like one thing that we've done is we have an affordable housing concept, right, that we're working on now with an architecture firm that we won a grant from the city on. So that's kind of things that we're working on.
Let's get together and talk about that.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Any other questions from the board? Doesn't look like it. Thank you for coming and sharing. This is exciting to have this new industry in Kern County, and appreciate what you guys are doing.
All right, thank you as well. We really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. That concludes our prepared remarks. The recommended action for your board is to approve the proposed economic development incentive agreement with PPI and authorize the chairman to sign. And we're happy to answer any additional questions that you might have.
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Let me grab a public comment real quick before we take that vote. Is there anybody that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Great, thank you. Okay, our next item is number 26 under the Human Resources Division, and this is recognizing county employees for work at the COVID-19 mass vaccination site. And I will turn it over to our Human Resources Director, Devin Brown.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Before we get started, I want to ask my friends to come down and join me at the podium here to be recognized. So those of you that came to be part of this celebration, I appreciate you joining me. If you can take a moment to do that.
And maybe it'd be easier for anybody that wasn't a part of this group to come down.
Seems like it, huh? That's a good example of why we're here.
That's awesome.
Well, while they're gathering, I'll get started, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Devin Brown, your Chief Human Resources Officer. So as you know, our county has an employee recognition awards program, but sometimes there's just things that happen that need to be specially recognized and brought before your board and presented on. And that's why we're here today. So we're here today to recognize the work that was done by our county employees and our county departments at our mass vaccination clinic at the fairgrounds this past year. And I know that they're still occupying the Harvest Hall out there doing booster shots and vaccinations for those who still haven't received their vaccination. But we're here to talk about the folks that showed up starting in January of this past year and worked for nearly 6 months, maybe even longer, managing that site. And so we wanted to have this, it's a little bit of a reunion for the folks behind me because they haven't seen each other except for the coworkers for several months, but it's a good opportunity for your board to really see what was put together out there. I know many of you toured the facility and spent some time out there. So this past January, as you know, we we started a mass vaccination clinic at the fairgrounds. We started off with our 65 and older population and our at-risk community coming to get their vaccines. And I remember getting the phone call from our then director, Matt Constantine, asking, Devin, I need up to 500 people to come work at this facility. How are we going to do that? And I immediately knew that we couldn't do that without our county employees supporting that effort. Thankfully, we didn't get up to the 500 threshold because that was actually a little stressful to hear that number. But really what all entailed into that was building a cross-functional, cross-department effort and really getting everybody engaged in this project and getting out there to support our community. So we had hundreds of employees that volunteered. Behind you are the folks that were there for most of the duration, some of our leads who helped man all the different stations and really became experts in the process. And one of the things that we learned, and Mr. Beckett, Tom from Public Health can attest to this, is we had to constantly iterate and improve. And that's another example of our county spirit out there, is we're trying to do this the best way, the most efficient way possible, and really serve our community effectively. And we did. We succeeded on that. So I wanted to take this opportunity to really to thank the folks that came out to support us. As I mentioned, it was a little bit stressful to think about putting this effort together, and we couldn't have done that without our county leadership coming together, supporting public health, our EOC, who was directing the traffic of this operation on a daily basis, and the staff behind me that were managing the workers out there. Hundreds of volunteers. I've never been more proud to be a county employee, and I can honestly say that. Every time anybody in the community came up to me and talked about the mass vaccination clinic, I just immediately jumped in and said, yeah, we're a part of that. We're doing that. And it was a tremendous effort. We have a lot of challenges here. You heard about some of those this morning from some of our employees. But what I know to be true is the county employees that serve the public do that because they want to serve the public. They want to serve their community. They want to stand behind them in their times of need and provide whatever it is, whether it's social services, behavioral health, and in this case, vaccination, and providing that health and safety during a really, really tumultuous and really scary time for our world. So these folks behind me dressed up. They were out there in elements, both cold, windy, rainy, hot as heck, and they didn't complain, and we really stood up and provided what I feel is one of the best examples of what we can do collectively as a county as we come together as one county. And so I want to recognize specifically a few people that were integral in this. Our Director of Public Health Services, Bryn Kerrigan, she has taken the helm at Public Health and really helped lead the effort with her support from Tom Beckett, who was on the ground out there innovating and leading the effort to make sure that it was an efficient operations. Our EOC Director of Emergency Services, Aaron Duncan, who was our fire chief. At the time, he was a deputy fire chief, but he was tasked with leading this effort for the fire department, making sure the EOC was organized to provide support to public health and the workers out there and essentially the community. And his team, he was supported by BJ Dawson from the fire department and our now fire division chief, Billy Steers, who was out there really on the ground, making sure that everybody was taken care of who came out there to volunteer because they were giving their time and effort to this endeavor. I want to thank my staff, particularly our Assistant Chief Human Resources Officer, Tracy Eldridge, and Principal Human Resources Analyst, Michael Goulart. They were tasked with managing the staff out there on a daily basis, making sure that we had enough people at all times to service all the different stations, making sure that at the end of the day we were getting vaccines that needed to be delivered rather than wasted. They were integral in making sure that they're working with the nursing staff out there to do that on a daily basis. And there's countless other individuals that are here. I'll name off a few with your indulgence so that we recognize that. And anytime you do this, of course, you're going to leave people out. And so I, of course, apologize in advance. Our EOC manager, Georgiana Armstrong, was integral. Chief Teisinger from the fire department, as you know, helped out leading the effort. Jim Weiner from General Services. Man, we set up tents and air conditioning and heat and it was amazing what we could put together out there. And he helped lead that effort and was out there on a daily basis. On the staffing side in my office, Eric Nesbitt started the project coordinating with all these departments, building the staffing out there and making sure that we had everybody supported, and that was taken over eventually by Jocelyn Reyes in our office, and she really did a tremendous job of having weekly schedules put together of staff out there and making sure. Sorry, I said BJ Dawson. That's the kid I went to high school with. BJ Corey. Sorry, BJ. I apologize about that. That's funny. Things that come back to you. And we had, tremendous support from our departments, as I mentioned, and we had leads from our Behavioral Health and Recovery Services Department, Valentina Chavez, Veronica Camarillo, Katrina Gonzalez, Jose Rodriguez Cota, Sonia Vargas, from DHS, Teresa Brito, George Frere, Tanya Frederick, from HR, Katie Barnett, was out there on a daily basis. From our probation department, Sandra Marquez and Jennifer Parks, and Juan Garza from our public defender's office. And I think public defender, they had a source of pride in making sure that they got all their staff out there because they really came and supported us and did some amazing things. So those were our leads out there. I do also want to acknowledge that, Craig Pope and his staff, they paved a whole area for the drive up in a matter of what seemed like days, so that we could have a drive up portion of this site. And so, the mountains were moved and hills were climbed by the workers behind me and the leaders, and we appreciate your support. I do want to give a moment to Director Kerrigan and Chief Aaron Duncan to give some comments, but I really do want to close by saying, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for all your work out there. It made our life very easy, knowing that our community was taken care of by these employees out there, and that they were doing what they came to work here for, and that is to serve our community in the best way possible, whatever that call of duty was on any particular day. And really, we couldn't have done it without them. It was a tremendous effort. So I'll turn it over to Director Kerrigan and then Chief Duncan.
Good afternoon. Devin did a fantastic job really summarizing all the efforts of all the different county employees at the mass vaccination clinic. Tom Beckett has been instrumental. What Devin didn't indicate is he's our IT manager, and we called him into our office in probably late October and said, you have 2 weeks, design a mass vaccination clinic using the fairgrounds, and then we're gonna pull everybody together and implement it. He did a phenomenal job, one take at it, and we were ready to implement. We called together department heads and we said, we need your help. We have mission impossible in front of us. We need to convert the fairgrounds into this functional clinic where we can vaccinate as many people as quickly as possible. we have a month and we don't have time to meet with you, just make it happen. And that's exactly what they did. They made it happen. Chief Duncan, he implemented the EOC, and we got to tell him, sorry, we don't have time to meet, but just make sure everything gets fixed. So he listened to me probably 30 minutes every single day. He put up with me, barking orders at him and asking him to fix things at the fairgrounds, and that's exactly what he did. He went back, met with all the team, they implemented the changes, and we had a phenomenal vaccination clinic running here in Kern County. Specifically, we vaccinated 99,949 people during our times at the fairgrounds, that initial run. Almost 100,000 people. We almost broke that threshold, so that's fantastic. That's an eighth of the vaccinations that have been administered to Kern County residents, so that's phenomenal. We couldn't have vaccinated as many people as we did without this operation. In closing, we received so many accolades from our residents after their experience out there, because we didn't just do it well, we did it with a smile. We were good at what we did out there. And one of them really, I think, summarized well exactly what my thoughts are and my gratitude to all the folks that worked out there. You have done an amazing job with getting seniors vaccinated, and for that, we will be eternally grateful for your efforts. Please know that this pandemic has not gotten the best of Bakersfield as you were on the job and rising to the challenge. Thank you does not say enough, and it is important to know that we community members and neighbors do indeed thank you. Excellent is a good word. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Duncan.
Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hard to follow that, but I just want to echo what everyone said. We were given a task to vaccinate 900,000 people in Kern County, and we did the rough numbers, and it was going to take us a year to do it. The plan with COVID, as you know, it was very fluid. It was very dynamic in the beginning. The tiers, red tier, yellow tier, who could get vaccinated, who couldn't. The plan kept changing, and your staff, your Kern County employees rolled with it, came together, put a plan together, changed the plan, made it work, just kept working the problem, and I think it went seamlessly. I just want to thank my Kern County firefighters, specifically Billy Steers, Jason Schillinger, Mark Radican, Lorena Flores, all my firefighters who came out and assisted, and all your department heads and all your department staff. They're excellent. They're all a pleasure to work with. They all love working in Kern County, and they do an excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I guess you guys are taking pictures, so it resonates with you how amazing this effort was. And, you know, again, thank you to all of us, anybody that's listening out there. It really is an example of what we can do as a county as a whole together. And I know, you know, all these people go back to their departments and do amazing things there too as well. So I really appreciate all of our county employees, and in particular those who came to the call in January and helped us put this all together. So that's our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Devin. Well, I was just going to say, I know this is a huge undertaking, and this is an incredible amount of work and coordination between everybody, and my hat's off to you guys. We got a whole bunch of rock stars working here in Kern County, and you guys are awesome. Thank you guys for what you do. Supervisor Perez, did you want to say something?
Yes, Chief, I just sent you a picture, and then I'm going to send you one to Britt in a second. But I want to say to you, excellent job. Heartfelt, honest, authentic presentation of appreciation of the magicians out there making it happen under really difficult circumstances. So really, from the bottom of my heart to all of you, there are no words to properly express gratitude, especially for us who were not on the front lines the way you guys were. We have other jobs, and they're very important. It's all important, but you guys really did something very niche and very, incredible. And it really makes me proud. But Devin, great job. Hats off to you.
Thank you, Supervisor Perez. Supervisor Couch?
I just want to say that sometimes sometimes the nicest thing we can say about government is we didn't get any complaints, right? I can tell you I didn't get any complaints, but what I can also tell you is I received numerous compliments about how friendly and nice you all were, and how organized it was. And these are not necessarily from people who are big fans of government. So you all did a spectacular job, and I just want to compliment you, commend you for it, and thank you for it, because you were all doing something that had nothing, wasn't your job, right? You volunteered to do this, so we appreciate that.
Thank you, Supervisor Couch. Supervisor Maggard?
Thank you. You saved lives. What bigger, more important thing could you do than save lives? So I'll always be grateful when I look back someday on how Kern County responded. You're the reason, you and many folks like you are the reason that many, many lives were saved. So thank you. I'll always be grateful to you.
Thank you, Supervisor Maggard. Supervisor Scribner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Absolutely, we appreciate you all so very much. Supervisor Maggard and I, we served on the ad hoc committee for our COVID-19 response, along with Bryn and Mr. Alsop. There were lots of people that were involved. As we were taking the incoming, the goalposts were always being moved on us. We were, as the chief alluded to, we were in tiers one day. We were supposed to test as many people as we could, test in these quartiles, focus here, focus there. And so we were dealing with that on a policy level, but all of you had to implement that for us, you and every other Kern County employee. And so we just greatly appreciate you so very much. The list of volunteers that was included in our board packet is a much larger list than the folks that are here before us. We know that you all work so very hard, and we're lead on this, but there were county employees from every department, from management to mid-management to rank and file, frontline staff, that all took this bull by the horns and really delivered for the community of Kern County, and we thank you so very much.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. All right. Another round of applause. Okay, our last item today deals with the redistricting process and has been noticed to be, has been noticed to the public to be heard at 3 p.m. I see that it's 2:55 right now, so we'll take a brief recess before we consider item 31 under County Council, just about 5 minutes or so. So with that, we are recessed till 3 p.m. Okay, the board has now reconvened. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Peters?
Here.
Supervisor Scrivener?
Here.
Supervisor Maggard?
Here.
Supervisor Couch?
Here.
Supervisor Perez? Thank you.
Right there. Before we begin and consider item number 31, I would like to introduce our interpreter, Mr. Fernando Lopez, who is available for anyone in the audience requiring translation of the proceedings from English to Spanish or a translator to address the board. Mr. Lopez, would you please share this information?
Para beneficio para las personas que no hablan inglés, solamente español, la Junta de Supervisores está proporcionando un intérprete, que soy yo, Fernando López. Atrás en la mesa hay unos audífonos para las personas que no hablan inglés y solamente español. Gracias.
Thank you. We'll now consider item 31 under County Council, and that is a presentation of draft alternative supervisorial district maps and public hearing of the 2021 supervisorial redistricting process, as well as direction to staff and consultants. And for that presentation, I will call on our County Council, Margot Rezon.
Thank you. Good afternoon again. This afternoon's agenda item is the next hearing in the redistricting process. As you know, the redistricting process is exactly that, a process. The county formally began the process on February 23rd, 2021, with the first presentation made by staff to your board. Since that time, and prior to your September 28th meeting, which included a redistricting hearing, the county hosted 5 public meetings and workshops. 25 service groups and chambers of commerce have been contacted. At the request of 7 of those groups and chambers of commerce, Mr. Jason Wiebe with the CAO's office has made presentations. I understand 2 additional presentations are scheduled for next week and will continue to be made as requested. Public outreach will continue, as well as receipt of and consideration of public comment. The dedicated redistricting website has been up and running for months. Based on the direction you provided on September 28th, draft maps were created incorporating public comment and proposals. These draft maps are starting points. Mr. Paul Mitchell of Redistricting Partners is here and will explain these first draft maps and information used to draw. Following Mr. Mitchell's presentation, it will be appropriate to receive public comment, followed by any comments and directions provided by your board. I'd like to add that Mr. Chris Scannell is available to answer any questions you may have. And finally, I'd like to thank Deputy County Counsel Stephanie Bowie, sitting next to me, and Jason Wiebe and Amanda Reese, both with the CAO's office, for their dedication to this important project. At this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you very much. Paul Mitchell with Redistricting Partners. Happy to be back here again today to talk about some draft maps that were created based on the recommendations from the board and the input from the community. So in this redistricting process, particularly the way that the Fair Maps Act has changed the process to put the community of interest testimony first and require outreach, the big challenge now for agencies, the counties and cities under the Fair Maps Act is how do we go from community of interest testimony to draft maps? And so we've put together a process that has really focused on what happened at those community of interest meetings. We have emphasized the traditional criteria in drawing maps for you, and these maps have been made public for 7 days. So the community has a chance to kind of digest these plans before this hearing. The current lines, just to review, these lines created the 5 districts and were updated in a mid-decade redistricting in order to create districts that were more effective for the Latino community. We have the current population of those districts. Even though the last redistricting was done based on data from the 2010 redistricting, and even though there has been significant changes in population, we find that the deviation in the current plan actually is relatively small at 9.5%. The other thing that we see is that there are 2 districts that are more than 50% Latino citizen voting age population. Both are around 64, 65% Latino CVAP. The testimony that we received, there was quite a bit of it, just a few things that we summarized last time we met and wanted to make sure that it was brought forward again. The high desert and rural areas, the military bases being in separate districts, the support from the Dolores Huerta Foundation in particular for the Equity Coalition's map, keeping farm workers together, and the Punjabi communities together. We had submissions, and this is again a new thing, where people could go online, utilize a tool that they get to from the county's website to allow them to draw their communities of interest, and also for them to draw their own draft plans. Again, something that wasn't really even possible at this level in 10 years ago. There were multiple draft plans that were submitted, and they were looked at as we were devising draft maps for you. The 4 draft maps that we have put into this presentation and have been made available on the website for the public to see and understand that you were going to be looking at, draft maps A, B, C, and then draft map EMC. Those maps were provided in a PDF with the cover page showing the overall district, just to kind of get a sense of it. Then a data table that dives into those numbers that we talked about. And then individual pages for each district that have an ability for people to see more of exactly what towns and cities are in each district. There's also a web version of this so that any user can zoom in to actual street level to look at where a line is. And when we look at these maps, this is the draft plan A, which is based on minimal changes. And you can see that the existing districts and that plan have very, very significant overlap with a couple small adjustments like here between A and B and between E and B. And if we zoom in to the Bakersfield area, you can see the differences in the districts. The existing districts are the shaded colors, and the new districts would be the dark outlines. So that ability to look at these relationships. Also for each of these, we can look at the city boundaries in relation to those districts and where the city boundaries lie in relationship to those boundaries. And again, each plan has the full data table. In this instance, we're looking at a deviation of 3.6%. And there are 2 districts at over 50% citizen voting age population Latino. Draft Plan B, this is a version that we created after having seen the plans that were submitted by the Equity Coalition. We took that first version of the Equity Coalition map that we had after our last hearing, and we modified it to look at, and I can zoom in a little bit, to look at the shape, particularly of that District 3 and its connection to 2 and 5, and tie it back to Bakersfield neighborhoods, to basically take the shape that was put together by the Equity Coalition and try to make it more compact. It was, so you could think of this as having the kind of DNA of the original coalition submission, but then having our work to try to make those lines representative of what we felt was something that the county might want to consider. And again, we have the overlay with the existing districts and with the cities, and then the deviation on this was 5.6. I do want to note that deviation of 5.6 doesn't mean that it's worse than a deviation of 3.6. We're talking about the districts in more context than just that one numeric value. And again, we have 2 districts that are over 50% CVAP Latino. And this is because of the construction of the districts that were given to us from the coalition. They created a District 3 that was much higher Latino at 45%. That's not a Voting Rights Act district necessarily, but it is a district that would have a greater ability to influence.
Supervisor Perez.
I have a quick question,
Yeah.
sorry. The deviation is from the 2010 numbers, the original 2010 maps, or from our recently drawn maps from a few years ago, 2 years ago?
Every plan has its own deviation. That's the difference between the most populated district and the least populated district. So it's within a plan. So if one district is 3% over, another district's 1% under, and those are the largest values, then the total plan deviation will be 4%.
I completely misunderstood that.
No, it's okay.
Thank you so much.
It makes we use the term deviation.
That's confusing.
Yeah, it is confusing. A lot in redistricting, we use these arcane terms, but when we talk about deviation, we talk about it sometimes to say your district is 1% over, so its deviation is 1%. And then like a sentence later, I say that the plan's deviation is 8%. Meaning that it's the difference between the highest and the lowest deviations for each district.
I'm reminded that I failed statistics twice in undergrad. Passed it on the third time, but that's more of what you're talking about.
I was everybody's study buddy in statistics, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Draft Plan C, just to go through this again, it does create 3 districts in its core and then 2 outer districts. And we have the same overlays that you can look at to see the construction of those districts. And then the same city zoom. And again, the deviation of 4.9%. One thing I want to point out with this construction was that it does create 3 districts that are over 50% citizen voting age population Latino. Just because, C does, yeah. Just because it does create 3 districts that are at this higher citizen voting age population Latino doesn't mean that they would be required. Chris Scanelli here is able to talk about what that means and whether or not that's something that should be considered. There are other aspects to what can create effective districts for the minority population beyond the numbers, having to do with the cohesiveness of those populations, the way the districts are drawn, and so on. So when we ask a question about this district having 3 districts that are over 50% citizen and voting age population Latino, it really does fall on Chris's shoulders to kind of maybe help interpret what that means for the board. Then the last plan in here is the newer version of the Equity Coalition maps. You'll notice that construction of D2, D3, and D5 is somewhat similar to my construction in B, where you have the second district and the third and the 5th district separated there. The overlays as well with the current districts, and you can zoom in there and see that the relationship to the current districts and then the relationship to the city boundaries. So the center part of this D3 is somewhat similar to what we have in Plan B, but there are other reasons that I believe that the coalition might speak to when they talk about their own plan and come up in public comment as to why the district was drawn that way. So I can't speak to every element of it. Their deviations were extremely low, 0% basically. And they can speak to if that was something that was, if they place a lot of value on that. In general, deviation is one of a family of concerns for a plan, not the be-all, end-all. And they create 2 majority-minority districts, and then, like I said, that one district, District 3, is relatively high in its citizen voting age population Latino. But again, how you judge that and its effectiveness and what it means for the minority population is something that Chris can speak to. So again, we have the current lines as the starting point in Draft Map A. Draft Map B is based on the original submission from the Equity Coalition. Draft Map C creates 3 majority-minority districts. And then the Draft Map EMC is the one that that the community put forward and that we put into the same format as all the other plans for you to consider. Again, we can flip through this. We have the current lines, Draft Map A, and you can see that they're very similar in their shape between these 2. Draft Plan B is again based on the Equity Coalition, but just a little bit more compact shaping and snapping to the neighborhood boundaries for the city of Bakersfield. Draft Plan C with 3 majority-minority districts, and Draft Plan EMC, the updated version, which creates, which is the plan that the community members can probably speak to. What we have next is really, at this point, we're always thinking about this as an iterative process. If you were to express more favor in some plans than others, maybe 1 or 2 of these, you say, well, we don't really think we need to see this at the next meeting. That's a part of the process, is maybe culling the field a little bit. If there are changes that you'd like to see, then suggesting some possible changes or kind of getting those out there on the record for us to potentially look at is in terms of coming back with something a little different. And then probably the most important part of this is that we're doing this in a public hearing. We're doing this and discussing maps that have been public for 7 days. We're engaging in a process that is extremely transparent and really taking in from the public. And so we'll continue to do that. Any changes that we make to maps will be made public again so that the public can be here and participate at the next hearing. And with that, I'll go ahead and close. Happy to answer any questions. And like I mentioned, Chris Scannell is here as well to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Scrivener?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question before we get into public comment and the rest of the board member comments. Specifically, when we met last, I had asked. So we're going to get a map that's going to have sort of minimal changes, and I'm going to tell you. And I know map A is your attempt at that. I want to tell you where I was coming from on that, and where I still am coming from, is the fact that when we redistricted as a result of the lawsuit and the court settlement, et cetera, 150,000 Kern County residents had a new supervisor after the conclusion of that, roughly, if my memory is correct. And so I don't want to see that situation occur again, where we have this drastic redistricting and that many people have a different representation. They're put in with different communities, et cetera. And moreover, I believe Chris had commented that the courts had already said that this map achieved the 2 minority-majority districts. It was blessed with the settlement. The judge was okay with it. And so from my perspective, we move forward with a map that's very similar to what we have, just making some tweaks, looking at communities of interest, of course, and all the other criteria, but largely focusing as well on the fact that we have to rebalance the populations. And so, and just taking a 30,000-foot view, I see, okay, well, my district, District 2, is overpopulated. District 5 is underpopulated by about the same amount. And then District 3 is overpopulated as well, not quite as much as District 2. And District 4 also is a little underpopulated, with District 1 remaining right at the mean. And so why didn't we, could you pull up a map of our existing, the map of our existing map and zoom into the metro area?
Yeah, let me.
Please, just basically, I want to look specifically at the Weibel, Panama, White Lane corridor.
So I think we have the zoom in on this presentation for, unless we can get to the web maps, which would be
I know if you go to the county website, you can, because I've got it pulled up right here, you can look at the existing, all 5 existing districts and zoom in pretty easily.
Great.
There. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging me just for a minute.
No problem. Thank you.
KernCounty.com. Okay.
Right there. Yeah.
Oh, they did. Yeah.
Okay, scroll down. Boundary maps. And then scroll down.
Yeah, right there. That's where I am, right there on that, all 5 districts.
Okay.
And then if you just zoom in on that, it seems to work pretty well.
So just zooming into this plan?
Yeah, right there, right in the center of the metro, where all the districts are coming together, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's sort of an upside down triangle that runs where 99 North is a boundary, and then South H Street right where District 3, District 2, and District 5 all intersect.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me if I'm saying in general, if you move over that, do you have a pointer where you can?
Right here. Can you see that at all?
Yeah, but
barely.
You know what? I need to go full screen. I apologize. Okay. Yeah. So go down below Highway 58.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right in that sort of upside down looking kind of triangular shape, where you have there's a little square that's just south of Brundage Lane. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if that area of District 3 went into 5 and then right below it, the area of District 2, the yellow, that's bordered by South H and 99 goes into District 5. I'd like to see a map that would calculate how much population balance that presents. And so if we can't consider that today, I'd like for that to come back in 2 weeks where we can just zero in. And the reason being is that I've represented that area both on the city council when I was in Bakersfield, most of the area, and also now I'm very familiar with it still, of course. And that 99 creates, in my view, an easily identifiable boundary, which is one of the criteria that we're supposed to be looking at, although it's not a natural boundary, it's an artificial boundary, but that's part of the criteria. And so I'm just interested in seeing if we just focus there, that seems like it would cause a little disruption. I'm in the position where I have to shed population, and I don't want to, frankly, lose anybody per se, but I know that we're in a situation where we do have to balance it out. And so to me, that seems like a very easy area. And so when I looked at your map A, I said, well, why did we do all of these changes when right there it seems like a pretty simple place to move population right there in the center of the metro area. So those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as I said, I'd like to see if we could have a map come back that does that in addition to any tweakings that the consultants might find necessary if we're looking at keeping communities or census tracts together that we deem appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Scrivener.
I don't know if you have an answer for. Maybe you did look at that and you said we can't do it because of this.
If I'm looking right here at the 99 and H Street south of Brundage, it looks as though we did in our plan take that out to 99. So in the draft plan A, we took it out to 99. We just didn't take it into the yellow. We only took it out into the green. So this area here that's underneath the letters LD, that green area in our plan is in District 5.
Yeah, I did see that, but
we can also put this area
specifically
here.
District 2, since I'm the one that has the most population that needs to be moved. Mm-hmm. It seemed to me like a pretty logical place to go.
Yeah, we can look at that for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Scrivener. Any other questions from the board at this time? Okay, Supervisor Perez.
So I want to thank you for taking on this rather courageous act of helping us in Kern County do redistricting. We had a pretty nasty lawsuit and pretty nasty politics, as you can imagine. And I think for the most part, we are all totally moving on and want to do the process right. But as you can imagine, there are some suspicions about the process. There's some distrust. And that's normal generally with government, so I don't want to overreact about it. But it is really the framework by which I want to ask you just a few questions for the public's benefit.
Yeah.
And I want to say that I'm very impressed with your presentation. Already I feel better about the process. You're excellent professional, very knowledgeable, and I'm increasingly feeling much more comforted by the process. So I want to say thank you and appreciate you taking on this, complicated but very important issues, right, that we have to resolve moving forward. But I would like to know if you have, and what you are comfortable sharing, if you have met with members of the Board of Supervisors privately to receive input about this process. You and I have not met, nor have I asked, and I won't do that. I'll wait for the public to be able to scrutinize my conversation with you. So can you shed some light on that, please?
Yeah, as a general practice, we don't talk to members of city councils or boards of supervisors about the redistricting process outside of maybe a meeting with legal counsel or if there's a need to discuss something, but I have not talked to any member of the County Board of Supervisors in Kern County.
That was really my main question, and I so appreciate it. The process, of course, to be due has to be credible, and I think we're engaging in a credible process from everything that I can see. You know, lots of people will have different opinions about it, and, you know, there will be some dissatisfaction at the end, I'm sure of it. But the process, of course, is one that we just need to be totally transparent, and so the public can understand and scrutinize the thought process that we're engaged in. Because I'm not talking to any members of the board about this subject. I want to have these conversations in public, and those are just some thoughts. And I'd want to thank you again, and I'm eager to hear from the public. As we just cleared up an issue that was confusing for me. That's helpful, and I imagine there are questions like that coming forward. So thank you for your clarity.
Of course.
Thank you, Supervisor Perez. Supervisor Couch?
I had a question. I know that the public can go online and they can submit a map. I'm curious if anyone has submitted a map that you think is worthy of discussion or consideration, given everything you have to take into account.
Well, as a rule, I think every public submission is worthy of consideration and looking at the rationale that they use for drawing the lines, and we definitely did that. We have staff at Redistricting Partners that every day goes to all our different agencies that have public mapping sites and pulls those maps down, converts them to the PDF, makes those into web maps, and does the work to make sure that we're, you know, giving those maps the same kind of weight and focus as everything else. So definitely the public submissions are valuable. Even as we're in the map selection process or looking at potential maps, submissions that come in can help us think of changes. Like as the supervisor already mentioned, there was a suggested change to a district that wasn't something we had thought of. And if that had come from a supervisor or a member of the public, it's definitely valuable.
Let me phrase it another way. Did you get any submissions that were just, that given the criteria you have to take into account, not just population, but everything else, that was a totally different look at what you need to accomplish, what we need to accomplish that you hadn't thought of?
Yeah, definitely. There were definitely plans that were very, very, very different than what we had thought of. And we looked at those, but then some of them, when we got direction from you as to the plans that you wanted to see us come back with, they just weren't ones that kind of made the cut in terms of becoming a potential draft map, because they didn't, you know, like there were plans that had...
Well, I don't think maybe have seen all those.
Yeah, there were some plans that, you know, have all 5 districts spread out, kind of cutting Bakersfield up like a pizza. You know, like that wouldn't necessarily be something that would fit with the Voting Rights Act. It wouldn't fit with the criteria you've established. It wouldn't fit with norms in redistricting. So those wouldn't be ones that we would kind of bring forward to you. But they did, having those public submissions was informative, and having the public submissions that came through the organizational work were also informative, obviously, with one of our plans just being a version of theirs.
But where would I see the maps that have been submitted by the public? Because online I see the ones that you're showing us today.
So there is a districtor account for the county, and there at that site there's a place for you to be able to look at the gallery of maps that people have submitted, and then I can make sure that you're made aware of where
I may have missed that.
Yeah, and we can make sure that you get all any plans that we've converted to PDFs.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Couch. Are there any other questions from the board before we move to public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll now go to public comment. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak regarding this item?
Good afternoon. I'm Lori Pesante, P-E-S-A-N-T-E, Director of Civic Engagement, Dolores Huerta Foundation, and I've been facilitating the community mapping space known as the Equitable Map Coalition. Just a couple things today. I wanted to request the 15-minute time frame at the next hearing for presentation of the Equitable Map Coalition map, precisely because of exactly what Mr. Mitchell just described, becoming aware of additional ways to make the map even more equitable presented itself in the last couple weeks. It was a very cool example of exactly how this process should work, where you're taking really high quality data and local knowledge and combining the two to really come up with a great map. we were, when our map was became known to folks who are really doing a lot of work on the Kern River Parkway, they reached out and said, hey, Equitable Map Coalition Space. They came to the Wednesday night meetings, which of course everybody's welcome to join anytime. They're always on Zoom, so everybody can participate. And they said, you know, we really don't want to see the parkway in the Mountain District. Can you put it in District 3? And of course, we looked at the effectiveness stuff together, and we had Mr. Garcia talk about what that would entail. And in particular, I really like the idea of asking Mr. Scannell to define effectiveness, because when we're working with people to talk about specific communities of interest, we definitely are measuring it against our own view of what effectiveness is, and it's probably going to be a good idea to get on the same page about that. I'm happy to report that Mr. Cooper of the Kern River Parkway Foundation and members of the local Sierra Club and other folks who've been working on the Kern River Parkway projects, we were able to put it into District 3, which is why the Equitable Map Coalition submission now has that really cool looking river shape that wends up into the mouth of the canyon, which has a special place in my heart because I used to drive that every day with my mom to Lake Isabella to go to school. So it makes a lot of sense, and they really helped us understand that, and it did not affect effectiveness. So I really want to thank all of those folks who helped us understand, and especially Mr. Cooper and the Sierra Club folks. Maybe you'll hear from some of them today. I certainly hope so. It was very, very helpful. So I would like to present our map completely in its finalized version, unless, of course, somebody comes to Wednesday night meeting and says, hey, you forgot us. Let's talk. And then we'll do the educational teachable moment about what considerations have to go into it, especially the effectiveness stuff. And we'll either be able to create effective maps including it, or we won't, but we'll have that conversation too. And that's what I've been doing for about 9 months. So here we go. Thank you for your time. Thanks.
Thank you. And I don't know if I made that clear before, but public comments, as I believe I stated earlier, are 2 minutes long. So please just try and be mindful of that 2 minute period.
Hi, Jeff Sanders. Just curious, I was under I understand the redistricting for population, just getting that in balance. I was under the misapprehension that race, religion, and such as that was not to be the main consideration. I also think that a lot of these redistricting is just simply to divide and become a political power play. So I keep hearing about the Hispanic population or another population. I thought we had done away with the segregation in the mid-1950s. And if we don't assimilate and we have a divided county and a divided country, how do we ever get along? So I can understand having a representative representing a portion of the county as an American citizen. I don't care what color you are. You're an American citizen. So I think we should be treated as American citizens, not as a color. So I think our representatives should represent us as American citizens, not as a color. And we should be representing legal citizens. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Supervisor Perez, did you want to say something?
Are you going to stick around? I just want to respond to you. Is that okay?
You can throw a stick at me.
I didn't know if you were going to leave or not, so I'll just say what I want to say now. So again, these are very difficult issues, and I want to preface them by saying I have the utmost respect for what you say, and I agree with a lot of what you said. I just want to explain one thing to you from the lawsuit that might be illuminating, it might not, but I want to just tell you that during the lawsuit, one of the main issue really is an issue called racially polarized voting. And what it means is that with a presentation of the history of elections, who ran in this election, who ran in that election, who won, how did the folks vote, right? What the evidence showed was that, not to be crude, Latinos will vote for a white elected. Like in Zach's first race, he had a very high percentage of Latinos vote for him, even though he had a Latino opponent, which he performed very well in that election, and that's a kudos to him. But the opposite, which is white people, Caucasians, voting for Latinos, does not happen. So the opposite, according to the history and the elections as they have actually played out, and part of what the court did was really looked in detail at each election and said who ran here, who won. My race was in play, Zach's, pretty much all of us up here had to be analyzed in that sense, and also elections from the past. So what we found was a deep and rich history of racially polarized voting. And so it's why the judge said, in the end, you could agree with it or not, but the decision was that in order for, in this instance, Latinos, other places in the South, African Americans, other places it's Southeast Asians, right? Just depends on the combination of people. When this particular valley, the history shows a deep and entrenched reality of racially polarized voting. And so the judge said, well, in order to give Latinos, the majority minority group in this instance, a meaningful opportunity to actually elect a representative of their choice, they then can't be diluted through the process, whether it's intentional or not. And proving intent is a very hard thing to do. I don't know that that was here or not. There's no way to know. But what we know is that the history of the area is racially polarized voting. Again, Latinos will vote for whites in big numbers. As they should vote for whoever they want. But the opposite is not true in a way that's so compelling that the federal court said, okay, we don't know what's intentional and what's not, and we're not gonna throw anybody in jail, but we're gonna say this needs to be fixed so that people can have a meaningful opportunity to choose an elected of their choice. I know that's complicated and probably not helpful, but I just thought I wanted to share that with you. It's nuanced and super complicated, but we have a particular history here that the judge thought that there should be some changes to. And I say that with all humbleness, sir, to you, I promise.
Okay. If people would vote on content and character rather than color, we wouldn't have these issues.
I agree.
And the more you segregate it by color, the less we are going to be a melting pot.
There's a lot of truth to that. And again, sir, I'm listening to you with a full mind and a full heart, I promise you. And I want a civil process, and for us to realize that we're all connected to one another, whether we like it or not, right? And the more we get to know each other, the better off we're going to be. Because you seem like a smart guy to me. I'd love to get to know you. I don't know that you want to get to know me, but that's part of what we have to do. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Could we have our next speaker, please?
Annette Longquist. This is my fourth meeting. The first two were virtual and the last was in person. I need to make sure I understand the proper procedures of these meetings. Each person is allowed 2 minutes to speak, correct? And each person is allowed 1 visit to the microphone, correct? At the last meeting, Lori Pisante was at the microphone 3 times for a total of almost 16 minutes. She claims she had maps and graphs and needed the extra time, but we never saw those maps and graphs. I believe she is a director for the Dolores Huerta Foundation and had the privilege of extra time, but when I tried to approach the microphone a second time, I was told I could not speak again. You said there was extra time at the end of the meeting, but all of that time went to Ms. Pisante. I was not invited to return to the microphone. Are derogatory racial remarks allowed in these meetings? Ms. Pisante read the email from her African-American friend who said, quote, "There is a problem with racism in Kern County. The women speaking earlier who are happy all happen to be white," referring to those of us who made positive, appreciative comments about the work our supervisors are doing. That added to the racially charged tone of the meeting, in which we listened to many speakers put people in groups by skin color, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. I thought districts were determined partly by the number of people living there. One woman said she did not want to be in the same district as those in gated communities. I'm old enough to remember the 50s and 60s when people marched and fought to bring about integration where people could live, work, and attend school together. But at the last meeting, I heard over and over the desire to create segregated communities of color. Are we going backwards? Seems that way. We also heard from Ms. Pesante that the people in gated communities, there's that phrase again, have a 98% voter turnout, which according to her means people of color are outvoted. I'm not sure how that happens with mail-in ballots. Every registered voter receives a ballot, maybe some receive more than that, in their mailbox. They fill it out and mail it back. Their vote is not diluted, as I read in the local newspaper. One voter, one vote. It's pretty simple. I support draft Plan A. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lundquist. And I just want to say at the last meeting, there were some issues as far as what presentations we were getting from a community group. So there are some differences in how time gets allotted for a group that's speaking on behalf of larger ones. And I try and be as fair and equal as I can to everybody, but sometimes it's kind of just a spur of the moment, trying to do your best you can while chairing these meetings. So I apologize for any unfairness perceived, but I appreciate you coming and sharing your thoughts with the board, though.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that this is what happened, and I wanted to make sure that I understood the procedures of the meetings, that they should be fair and equitable for everybody.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could we have our next speaker, please?
Russell Johnson on behalf of the Associated Builders and Contractors. Thank you, Chairman Peters, members of the board. First, I'd like to say on behalf of our member companies and the workers that we train, we just want to thank you for having a public process and an open dialogue. I think that's important as we go through this. Also, from our perspective, we just want to share that you just went through this process recently. You had the judgment, and now you find yourselves getting to know new constituents. They're getting to know you. So keeping as close to the base map of the existing boundaries, I think, makes common sense. And it puts you guys in a position where then you can go and make the deviations you need to make and the quick changes so that you get within the boundaries that are required by the rules. And it keeps it simple for the community as well, because as you know, I don't need to tell you, you've gone out, you've all knocked doors, you get to know those folks that you represent, and the reality is they need to get to know you, and that process takes time, and keeping that as consistent as possible is as important it is for them as it is for you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just one more comment. We have not endorsed a map to date, but we will be engaged and be monitoring the process to ensure that we just give some feedback where we think a map fits those goals of keeping consistency for the current electorate. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
My name is Kelly Carden. I'm a lifelong third-generation Kern County resident, and I'm running for the Kern County Board of Supervisors, representing what is currently District 2. I'm here today to speak against forcefully inserting a third majority minority district into Kern County. The proposal does not take into account either the county or its residents. Asking or even expecting people to make decisions based solely on skin color is frankly un-American and downright offensive. Making changes to the politics of the county based solely on race without considering economic, cultural, or social backgrounds is degrading and patronizing. Trying to overrepresent groups in one district will simply remove that representation they have in other districts. It cheapens the minority experience carried outside of our skin color. History has proven time and time again that redistricting only for political influence will negatively affect the residents tricked into believing it would help the most. The poorest members of the county would now be its least represented. Refusing to acknowledge the political and social differences in the all-encompassing minority category slams us back into the racist box that we, myself included, are so desperate to climb out of. I encourage the Board of Supervisors to move forward with Proposal A. It is the best proposal. It keeps us in the best lines. Thank you.
Thank you. We have our next speaker, please.
Supervisor, my name is Jesus Garcia. I am the creator of the Equitable Coalition map. I did not, however, I drew the map. I didn't create it. It was created by the community through the various meetings that Ms. Basanta said. Kern County has been the bad boy of redistricting for 20 years. You've been sued twice, and only after being sued was the 5th district created and then the 2nd district created just 2 years ago. You're known across the GIS web as the bad boys. You're entering the academia of how a bad district was created. What we're trying to do here is to prevent that from happening again. Our map, again, is equitable. It follows the law. Basically let me tell you, the Fair Maps Act is here because of Kern High and because of this board. A lot of what has occurred here in the creation of those districts over the years was implemented into the creation of those laws. So you guys own the Fair Maps Act because of your bad behavior in the past. What we are in the process here is creating voting rights districts, VRAs. And that was the basis 2 years ago, and what we're hoping is that is not the basis going forward ahead. Our lines are equitable, they are population balanced, they are CVAP balanced, and by the way, they are voting balance. I've got the files from here, I've analyzed them, I've analyzed all of them, and I can tell you for a piece that we don't want to go to that third criteria, which is the racialized polarized. These districts do not belong to you. They belong to the citizens of Kern County, and with 2020 census, it's a clean slate. A clean slate. All of you are wonderful, intelligent individuals. You should run in those new districts and convince those residents of your worthiness to continue on this board. So again, thank you for this opportunity. The analysis will come forth.
Next speaker, please.
Leilani Tedeschi. Redistricting should focus on ensuring that each district has a comparable population count, as through the years, districts lose population and others gain as a result of moving around and new folks leaving, or new folks entering into the community and others leaving. I visited the website and looked at Plan A and Plan B and compared it to the existing drawing. The recent lawsuit resulted in the current boundaries that all parties had agreed upon, and the Plan D drawing truly appears like there's gerrymandering, which is the manipulation of drawing district lines for political power. Ms. Perez had commented to prior speaker, Jesse, and had made a statement that I wasn't aware of the historical voting figures. And I'd like to ask everyone that's white here, if there was a viable Hispanic, African American, Asian candidate, would you vote for that person in your district? Absolutely. Raise your hand, please.
Okay. I know that. Please, we can't be doing that kind of stuff. It's just to discuss with the board.
I challenge the statement. Also, I would like to know how many of, whether they were Hispanic, African American, or Asian, or any other Caucasian or race, how many of those individuals ran where the white demographic did not vote? Was it 1 or was it 10? If it was one individual, I don't know if history can be dictated on one. So I'm just curious what those findings had disclosed.
Well, it was enough to compel a federal judge to rule against Kern County.
Okay.
I think that's pretty compelling. If you want to get together and talk about it, I'm happy to. But
Sure.
I mean, guys, I'm really
excuse me.
trying to be as respectful as I can,
Yes, well-
given the difficulty of the situation. But this back and forth about details is not, this is not the venue for that. I am telling you that the history presented in a court of law I hope you submit to the courts of law in this country. I do.
Absolutely.
And I was happy to take whatever decision that they gave, and we did. But they presented evidence, and it was utterly compelling, and they ruled against Kern County. Those are the facts. Moving forward, we don't have to dwell on that. We just have to do what's right, comply by the law, recognizing these are difficult issues, but that the history was presented, and it was closer to the 10 than the 1, I promise you that. But I'm not making this up. I have no reason to make it up. I didn't know any of it until the court hearing. When I heard the presentation myself, I just didn't know. It was new to me.
Okay, well, I'll look up the lawsuit and the specifics of that.
There's a 70-page decision on it that it's public information, and it just sort of lays out the basics of how the judge reached the conclusion that he did. Of course, lots of people will disagree with that decision, but it is a court of law that we are subjected to and that we abide by.
And the resultant maps were agreed to.
Correct.
And Plan A, which I support, most closely resembles that.
I think that's a very good argument. It's a strong argument. It is.
And the audience here supports that we would vote for a qualified candidate no matter what race they are.
Okay, thank you. Can we have our next speaker, please?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Ana Moreno. I lived on the east side for 23 years. I'm Hispanic, and I'm not in favor of the equity map. I don't fully understand the redistricting process, but I understand that the census did not change much, and yet the equity map calls for unjustified drastic change that would unjustly disrupt the map balance, negatively altering the county. It's my understanding that this disruption would cause 4 supervisors to be dropped from their current districts, which would remove them from office. But District 5, which is the district that I live in, will not be affected. To me, the equity map implements discrimination. Ironically, fighting discrimination is what the Dolores Huerta Foundation is all about. Many who do not favor the equity map will not have data from CSUB or have someone drawing maps for them or have a professional, well-staffed, well-funded organization to represent and support them on this issue. They're pretty much on their own, so I asked the board to give those individuals the same consideration and the same fair advantage of addressing their concerns as would be given to a professional organization. And know that Kern County residents of all skin colors appreciate what you do for our community. We trust that you will uphold your Board of Supervisor responsibilities with fairness, integrity, and never allow intimidation from anyone to keep you from making good, fair, and honest decisions that your constituents deserve. The census has spoken. Please vote to adopt a fair, politically balanced district map, and that map is Plan A. Thank you.
My name is Margie Bell. I'm a retired high school and also junior college teacher. I taught for some time in a civics education program as the English component. And I'm really inspired to come here because I believe that citizenship is important and coming to meetings is important and understanding what's going on politically. And I hope I've got it right. The Kern Cahuilla chapter of Sierra Club is endorsing the Equitable Maps Coalition plan for redistricting. And we thank Lori Pasante for represented by Lori Pasante for the time and effort they have put into this plan and the many hours of community meetings that have enhanced our appreciation of the intricacies of redistricting in order to comply with the new voter equity requirements. Our focus in Sierra Club for the past few years has included promoting green energy, mitigating global warming, and supporting environmental justice. throughout our land. EJ means that the general public must include disadvantaged communities in decision-making processes and problem solving. We all know by now that communities of color and indigenous populations need to be included in decisions affecting all of us. The term justice is not a mere abstraction, it is a thing we enact. What happens to others in our communities also happens to us. Promoting justice for all of us should be part of our DNA as Americans. Nothing is more basic to us as Americans as the concept of justice and equal representation at the ballot box. Yes, our chapter is particularly involved in keeping the Kern River Corridor, Hart Park, Lake Ming, and the new riparian areas, Shell Park and Camp Okeechee, in a local district whose representative can most effectively address concerns centering on the Kern River, created and used mainly by local residents. We ask that the board use this knowledge to include the Kern River Corridor in any decision you will make. Thank you, Mike Maggard, for supporting the Kern River Corridor, and Jeff Flores also.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Mary Helen Barrow. I live at 201 Jefferson Street in East Bakersfield. I come late to this process. I'm recovering from surgery. I had a fall at the Veterans Memorial last Veterans Day. And I want to congratulate everybody for all the hard work that you've put into this. But just from the brief look that I've had at the different maps and the comments that I've been listening to, I really hope that you reject A and consider other maps, especially the equity map. I think that ultimately it will result in less litigation in the future and a more equitable representation for all the residents of Kern County. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Could we get our next speaker, please?
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. My name is Kaylin DeLeon Peterson, representing the Greater Bakersfield Chamber. We are the largest and broadest business organization in the region, representing over 1,000 members, which collectively employ over 70,000 Californians. I'll keep my comments very brief today and just kind of wanted to provide you with the general viewpoint of the Chamber regarding this issue. As it stands today, we would advocate and encourage the board to consider approval of the map that offers the least amount of changes to the current district lines. As it's drafted today, that appears to be County Draft Map A. This map offers the closest representation to what your current districts look like. And our view is such because, as you know, the county recently underwent a comprehensive redistricting process just a couple years ago. One that has already been adjudicated and signed by a federal judge. And we believe that keeping the lines closest to those that were agreed upon at the time by the county and community groups alike seems to be the fairest option moving forward, while of course making the necessary population changes that were discussed here today. We understand and believe in fair representation for the constituents that you serve. And we believe that a map that makes those small and necessary changes while also keeping the district lines as close to they are today is the best and fairest option moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Board. My name is Lisa Sanchez from Rosamond, California. I have been looking at the maps, and I'm still trying to figure out why I know the census happened, so we have to redo it, but why so big when we were just sued a few years prior that it has to be done again. So I'm kind of confused about that, but I'm getting help from other county officials to figure that one out. But I'm all for A. I will have Roseman Municipal Advisory Council. We will be voting on a map and sending you a letter as well very soon. I just don't believe that everybody understands that when we take districts and move our lines so drastically, that any money that goes, that's split, that's gonna go, so once District 1 and 2 combine, your parks and recreation is gonna go down. Your general fund is gonna go down because now you have that great area to share it with, and I don't believe that everybody really understands that. So I just wanted to point that out to everyone, that that is just too big of an area to have to share all those funds. And then you have a little tiny area. So I'm for A. We will go ahead and make something with Roseman Municipal Advisory Council and draft you a letter right away. But good luck. Not envious of you folks. Have a good day.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Hello, board. My name is Greg Ardois. I am Ardoin. I have been an educator here in Kern County for 25 years. The last 16 of those have been working in the Kern County Superintendent of Schools, which has given me the pleasure to teach our students all around this beautiful county, and especially in some of these rural and outlying areas. And one of the biggest difficulties is building that civic engagement. I want to thank all the educators in here, especially Miss Bell, for working on those civics with our students. But one of the difficulties is showing them the beauty of the democracy that we hold so dear. And I think a lot of these folks who are highly civically engaged would also support engaging our students and the 18 to 35, which is the largest voting block here in Kern County, to get involved. And it's hard for me to straight-face say, hey, you live in Lake Isabella, you live in Delano, you live in Roseman, and you're being represented really well as the maps currently stand. I can't lie to them and say, hey, your vote really means something, you're gonna get out there and make a change if you get your whole community involved to elect a supervisor that you support. Because they're being watered down. It's not even speaking on race or anything, it's just they're not having their say. They're not being able to make the sway and the change that if they're knocking every door in their neighborhood to get involved. So the Equitable Maps Coalition has done a great job at identifying those areas and listening to the public and listening to these groups and making them a priority. So building up democracy, which I think most folks here are in support of, and building up that civic engagement is represented in that Equitable Maps Coalition submission. So if all we're doing is leaving things for the sake of tradition and staying with Map A because it's what we've done for so long, that is not a good enough excuse to neglect our students and our future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. We have our next speaker, please. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board now. Oh, hold on, Jason, I think we got one more actually sneaking in behind you.
Hi, sorry. Hi, thank you. My name is Marian Vargas. I hadn't come prepared to speak, but I'm interested in the process. And from what I've read and thought about, it seems to me that the best plan is the Equitable Maps plan. I am aware that there's been a lot of community input into that, and as another speaker mentioned, the group that's doing that, they have a lot of well-qualified, well-prepared individuals, so I hope that their recommendations are thoughtfully considered. I looked at their proposed map in an email that came out, and it was from another organization that was supporting that. And I noticed that most of the Kern River Parkway Lake Ming, Hart Park, et cetera, had been chopped off from District 3, and I had great concern that I couldn't see how that area could be well represented by a district that was so different as District 1 is where it was proposed to be. And so those concerns were expressed, they were considered and responded to. And I made a comment to a friend about the importance of speaking up about those kinds of concerns, and that we need to have citizens come and speak. And the thought occurred to me that I think the area that snakes up along the Kern River that has been well represented thus far by District 3, it really does, it's used by members of Greater Bakersfield community. It's a regional park area. And but what it is it's nature. It's a part of nature that we get to enjoy, but that we also have a responsibility to protect. Nature can't get up and speak at this meeting. Individuals can, but I can tell you, being out in that area, we need advocacy to protect it so that we can continue to enjoy it and use it for future generations. So that's kind of why I spoke. Now, I haven't been clapping, and I know we have a lot of people clapping, and I just want you to know there are people who are not clapping who, support that plan. So thank you for letting me speak and for listening, and I wish you the best in your decision making. Thank you.
Could we have our next speaker, please?
My name is Nadine Escalante. Thank you, supervisors, for listening. Just like this woman who just spoke, I wasn't prepared to actually speak today. Lori Passante is one of my good friends, and she's been educating me on the redistricting process, and believe me, it is mind-blowing. It's very confusing. I just wanted to say that I believe that the county should go with the equity map, because the county's history is always staying with what is traditional, what we've always done. And because of that, we have not moved forward. We have been in a lot of lawsuits. We have a reputation of being an extremely racist, dysfunctional county. And a lot of people like myself, who are Native American, half Black, was raised in a white middle-class family by a very good white set of parents. I have watched growing up in my beautiful neighborhood as a child, having streetlights, good streets, nice parks. But as I've grown up and stayed on the east side, I have watched the east side decline. And the only two supervisors I've ever had has been Mr. Maggard or Leticia Perez. Whenever it switched districts from Mr. Maggard's hands to Leticia, I wasn't in a fury of like, oh my God, who's my supervisor? I was just like, okay, I just switched supervisors. It's not that big of a deal. When you educate yourself on it, when you educate your children on this, I'm educating my 14-year-old on this and my 17-year-old on this right now. And as we have community members that we all are not going to agree, but when we talk about, what is our U.S. history and being a true American, remember, a lot of white people came to this Native American land and stole land from my ancestors. So remember, when we're creating equitable maps, we're reminding us about this is Native American land, and let's represent all of the people that live in this county. And it's very convenient that a lot of these people didn't even mention Native Americans in our community. So thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
Hello again, Dennis McLean. The last speaker, I didn't agree with a lot. I thought we were trying to get away from racism, but I grew up in this town, born in '51, went to elementary school, 50s, high school, 60s, and we had a lot of race riots back there. I mean, real ones, not political, real race things. And I thought we were getting over that, but apparently The new left is bringing this in to divide us, and I am totally opposed to that. I'm a homeowner, District 1 for 40 years. I look at these maps, and I see Plans C and EMC as an attempt by someone or somebody or some organization to segregate the county. Do we really need that again? So I am in favor of Map A, and that's my opinion.
Thank you. Can I have our next speaker, please?
My name is Timothy Long. I live up in Caliente. I would think by this time in history we would be done with racism. You would think it'd be over. My great-grandfather was full-blooded Cherokee. You don't hear me complaining. Has to come to an end. We are a people, American people. We're U.S. citizens. That's it. I'm for Plan A. Quit dealing with this. So many of this individual, we're just citizens. And just take A. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public speakers? Going once, twice. Public comment is now closed. Jason, come on up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My presence here is a sober reminder that as part of these hearings, I will be required to either summarize or vocalize public comment that was provided via email or our web form or voicemail, et cetera. So I'm going to do a little bit of both today, and hopefully won't have to endure my voice too long. I think many of the comments have been addressed, and that was members of the Kern River Parkway, the initial Equity Maps Coalition didn't include parts of that or all of that in District 3, and I think that's been reconciled. So I think a summary of many of those comments have been resolved. They were initially opposed to that map, but have now been included with the updated map, Equitable Coalition maps. Some comments that were specifically asked to be read into the record, which I will do. Robin Walters, President, Democratic Women of Kern, wrote, Democratic Women of Kern, the largest Democratic group in the southern San Joaquin Valley, supports and requests that this board adopt the 2021 Kern County Equitable Map Coalition proposed map for the Kern County Board of Supervisors, also known as the Equity Coalition Map. The Kern Equitable Map Coalition is a coalition of Kern residents and organizations whose goal in the 2021 redistricting process is the adoption of equitable maps throughout Kern County. We support the Equity Coalition Map because it achieves this goal in every way possible. It is data-driven, based on PI 94-171 redistricting data, with state incarcerated persons reallocated and federal incarcerated persons removed, electoral data sets on 2020 census block and citizen voting age population, tabulations on 2020 census block and geography, as well as key equity indicators. Rigorously inclusive, beginning with the collection of hundreds of community of interest surveys at food banks, vaccination clinics, flea markets. The MC invited those surveyed and anyone else interested in equitable maps to work with a demographer every week for 9 months to make the map even more responsive to Kern County's needs. It's legally compliant, follows the California Fair Maps Act, Voting Rights Act, and the California Citizens Redistricting Commission Mapping Playbook document, creating 2 Voting Rights Act districts and 1 Voting Rights Act coalition district, while also keeping key communities of interest as whole possible. We support the Equity Coalition Map because it gives Kern residents the best opportunity to elect representatives responsive to the needs of all, no matter their race, ethnicity, or zip code. That ends Ms. Walters' comments. There were a few related to maintaining the status quo, or Map A, that I'll briefly quote. Kimberly Rasmussen wrote, I strongly oppose the map presented by the Dolores Huerta Group. It is a drastic change to the current one and would radically alter the county. This proposed map would cause 4 supervisors to be dropped from their current districts, which would remove them from office. Leticia Perez would be the only supervisor to remain in office and not be negatively impacted by this change. The person I voted to represent me as my supervisor would be terminated. This is not an equitable solution. I'm happy with this point with my supervisor, Mike Maggard. Paul Duke wrote, concerning the matter of redistricting our county, yes, we should not for the sake of one perceived underrepresented group, but for us all. Let us not jump into this until we assure ourselves our voting system countywide is fair and just. The last election gave us all pause and too many questions. Left or right, Republican or Democrat, independent or green, let us all be assured one person, one vote is maintained. This is what true representation is about, and I ask the supervisors to call for a complete audit of the county voter rolls, demand this as a condition before this redistricting is approved, that all voters are validated in this county. This is not hard. I looked at your previous agenda. You have just spent thousands of taxpayer dollars on hiring personnel, trips, maintenance on equipment. Now is the time to spend money on our most important structure of our representative republic, our voting system. Richard Thompson writes, I have been informed the Board of Supervisors will hold a public meeting tomorrow at 3 p.m. to consider redrawing the district supervisors' maps. Like many who work, I cannot attend the meeting to voice my opposition to this proposal. Redrawing the map was done, I believe, as recently as 2019. Our county population has not changed dramatically, and the proposal from the Dolores Huerta Foundation would likely eliminate your seat as currently drawn with the 3 others. This appears to be a political power grab. We like the job Philip Peters is doing and want to keep it that way. Tim Prado writes, before I give my statement, this is the 3rd hearing for redistricting, and again, the county is not engaging the public in good faith. An example of this is today's hearing being handled at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, which does not allow residents to give their opinion on how they want the county to draw the districts for the next 10 years. I live in Lamont. The Board of Supervisors know that I've come in the past advocating for my community for critical infrastructure projects. I support the Equity Coalition map because it would empower residents of Lamont, Arvin, and Weed Patch to continue working on the necessary projects like flood prevention. This week, California saw a record-breaking storm to the residents of Lamont like myself. It is always the same situation, whether the storms are record-breaking or not. To demonstrate this, I've included 4 photos, which I've included with your packets, taken 2 years apart, and I would like the supervisors to show them and place them on the record so that the public can see why we need an Equity Coalition map. Going to, again, there were a lot of comments, kind of black or white, really, that didn't request comments, didn't request to be read, but to summarize that they're favor of the Equity Coalition map and those that were more in favor of the status quo, most aligned with draft map A. I do have some specific letters that were provided to the redistricting staff and your board. I do want to read one and then summarize a group of 8 letters. So I will first read a letter that came from the Comité, excuse me, I can't read this, Comité Progreso de Lamont. I'm writing on behalf of Comité Progreso de Lamont to support and request that this board adopt the 2021 Kern County Equitable Map Coalition proposed map for Kern County Board of Supervisors, also known as the Equity Coalition map. The Kern Equitable Map Coalition is a coalition of Kern residents and organizations whose goal is the 2021 redistricting process, whose goal of the 2021 redistricting process is the adoption of equitable maps throughout Kern County. We support this map because it achieves this goal in every way possible. The Equity Coalition map is data-driven. Redistricting data with state incarcerated persons reallocated and federal incarcerated persons removed, electoral data sets of 2020 census blocks and citizen voting age population. It's rigorously inclusive, beginning with a collection of hundreds of community of interest surveys at food banks, vaccination clinics, and flea markets. The EMC invited those surveyed and anyone else interested in equitable maps to work with a demographer every week for 9 months to make the map even more responsive to Kern County's needs. Legally compliant, it follows the California Fair Maps Act, Voting Rights Act, and the California Citizens Redistricting Commission Mapping Playbook document, creating 2 Voting Rights Act districts and 1 Voting Rights Act coalition district, while also keeping key communities of interest as whole as possible. It empowers communities. as this is an organization based in Lamont and works with residents of Lamont, the Equitable Map Coalition empowers residents of Lamont to advocate for issues that affect their community. We support the Equity Coalition map because it gives Kern County residents the best opportunity to elect effective representatives responsive to the needs of all, no matter their race, ethnicity, or zip code. And the final comment I want to make is really a summary of, I think, 8 different organizations, and I want to name those organizations. Okay, in the last couple of days, the City of Ridgecrest, the COSO Operating Company, Indian Wells Valley Economic Development Corporation, Ridgecrest Chamber of Commerce, Ridgecrest Regional Hospital, Ridgecrest City Councilman Solomon, I apologize, Solomon Rajaratnam, thank you, sir. China Lake Alliance, and Sean Hancock, the president of Cerro Coso Community College, all wrote letters. And I've summarized the key points, many of which were the same, but I want to make sure I hit all of those. 2018 map remains the appropriate district structure. A single district for Eastern Kern County would have to represent a minimum of 17 of 22 small cities, townships, or municipalities, many with distinct and diverse communities of interest. Socioeconomic differences in a single vast geography of a single East Kern. There exists socioeconomic differences in a single vast geography of a single East Kern district. The strategic assets of East Kern are diverse and important enough to Kern County's future that require representation from 2 supervisors, including both military bases, the Mojave Air and Spaceport, and leadership in renewable energy and diverse recreational tourism that include wide open vistas, the Sierra Nevada mountains, and desert recreation. Ridgecrest is Kern's 3rd largest city, and the important and complex issues involved with China Lake Naval Air Weapon Station and the impacts of our recent earthquakes require more dedication from a supervisor rather than a supervisor that must all try and focus on so many other divergent issues and geography that encompasses East Kern. A dedicated supervisor that serves the Ridgecrest area can focus on the very unique characteristics for the provision of healthcare delivery, including emergency medical services and transport. Healthcare services are not homogeneous across East Kern in the proposed Equitable Maps Coalition map. A supervisor would not be able to effectively represent the interests of 2/3 of the landmass of Kern County, causing a sole representative to be disengaged with many communities and residents due to the vast geography and diversity within a single Eastern Kern district, leading to a 1 versus 4 in the decision-making process on issues that impact East Kern. Water infrastructure needs are unique to the local water basin in the Indian Wells Valley and requires a supervisor's undivided attention, which would suffer under a single East Kern district. China Lake Naval Air Weapon Station in District 1 and Edwards Air Force Base, NASA Armstrong Center in District 2 share similar research, development, and test missions, but are substantially different with many complex and widely different local issues, funding, and customer bases. Critically important in any future round of the base realignment and closure BRAC process, where the 2 facilities could be in direct competition for substantial mission and workforce impacts. A single supervisor representing both bases would create a conflict of interest. The BRAC Commission assesses a level of community support at the state, county, and city local levels and would require separate representation of each base to ensure the successful future of both. Separate and dedicated representation for the Indian Wells Valley is needed to ensure high technical, scientific, and an educated workforce to carry out the missions and research at the China Lake Naval Base for now and in the future. Cerro Coso Community College is dedicated to supporting efforts to develop and sustain the talent pipeline necessary for the critical and growing aerospace and renewable energies industries and requires a high level of dedicated representation to advocate for these educational and talent level requirements that are unique to the area. The final comment I want to make, I know we did get a lot of comments via phone and feedback from Tehachapi residents that were concerned about moving to LA County. That is not what this is about. We're adjusting county lines. we're adjusting lines within the county. I think there may have been a misunderstanding within congressional or state legislative districts, but Tehachapi will remain in Kern County. We're happy to say so. And apparently, from all the comments I got, they will be happy to hear that if they haven't so already. That concludes all the comments and summary of comments, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
And thank you, Jason. I appreciate it. So I'll go ahead and bring it back to the board, and I'll start with Supervisor Scribner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. First of all, I want to thank everybody who came today and also who submitted comments via email, and we really appreciate all the input. I want to go back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier in regard to the maps. Map A, for the ones that have been presented to us and to the public at this point, most closely reflects my thinking on what we need to do, which is to reduce the amount of disruption, but specifically to acknowledge some characteristics of the county, and specifically in Eastern Kern, the mountain communities, and the deserts. But what I was suggesting earlier in looking at that corridor between 99 and South H that we talked about, I know the consultant, they moved part of that area from 2 to 3, but that wasn't what I think we needed to start with, because 3 is already overpopulated. I'm talking about moving those areas into 5 from District 2, not part of it in District 3. So just to clarify, I'm in the position where I have an overpopulated district, so I'm going to have to reduce the population. To me, that seems like an area that has that clear, easily identifiable boundary with Highway 99. And so I think that that's where we should start. And so if you want to call it option A 2.0 when it comes back to us, then I'd be happy if you would do so. In addition, if we're still looking at District 2 being overpopulated, another area to look at could potentially be the Fuller Acres area. If you're looking at communities of interest, I think that community has a community of interest with the Weed Patch corridor to the north, or perhaps with Lamont to the south, provided you can allow for the connectivity. So District 2 still continues to have the area of South Central Bakersfield, south of Panama. Moving on to speaking specifically about why I think that Map A or some iteration of our existing map is important, specifically to keep 2 districts that represent Eastern Kern. This, in contrast to what the equity map and others have presented, where all the mountains and all the deserts, those should all be together. There are very distinct differences between those communities. I want to start with the 2 military bases. We heard some of that from the comments that Mr. Wiebe read that came from folks in the Ridgecrest area. I couldn't agree more with their comments, but I want to key in on a few things. Outside of the fact that there's 2 different branches of the military with China Lake Naval Weapons Station and Edwards Air Force Base, you have a situation that comes along every decade or so, and that's a real rough estimate, called BRAC, the Base Realignment and Closure. And so that's when an assessment is made of the military installations. You look at the mission, and you look at where can we consolidate, where can bases be even eliminated, which is obvious in the acronym, because closure is part of it. When you have the BRAC process, everyone in the community needs to be advocating for the base. I think that you have a difficult situation when you're looking at military funding, where you have a pie of a certain size and everybody is competing for a slice of that pie, to have a supervisor representing both bases that could be in a competing situation when you're looking at that funding. And so having 2 supervisors, one representing one, currently myself with Edwards Air Force Base and Chairman Peters with China Lake, that is ideal. And that's why that needs to continue. And so any map that doesn't have 2 East Kern districts, in my view, is a disservice to the military installations and the jobs that they represent for the respective communities. Moving on to lumping all the mountains into one district. Tehachapi and the Kern River Valley are very different, and so is the Fraser Park area. Fraser Park is currently in District 2 with Tehachapi. Obviously, I acknowledge that, and that was the result of the lawsuit where drastic changes were required in order to create the two majority-minority districts. But as it stands right now, Tehachapi and Fraser are in the same district, my district, and I'm happy to have them. But looking at including the Kern River Valley, this is where I think that is problematic. With Tehachapi, you have the major industries, is agricultural, with our apple orchards, our organic vegetables and other vegetables that are grown in the Cummings Valley, and also our growing winery industry, wine grapes being grown. Renewable energy is obviously a large employer, both wind and solar just to the east in the desert. The prison there, CCI is a major employer. Mining, you have I'm talking in East Kern in general here, with Rio Tinto. You have two cement plants with Lehigh and Cal Portland, and also aerospace is a major employer for the Tehachapi area, with both folks that drive to Edwards Air Force Base and also the Mojave Air and Spaceport. Contrasting that with Kern River Valley, where tourism is the large economic driver with the river and the rafting that occurs, the hiking, the camping, and there's also a tremendous amount of public lands there that are utilized. Tehachapi doesn't have any large swath of public lands other than the county-owned park, Tehachapi Mountain Park. With Fraser Park, you have a lot of folks that live there but work either in the LA area or in the Bakersfield area, the Town Commerce Center, the outlets, et cetera. So saying that all the mountains are the same is not accurate. Moving on to the desert, same situation. Obviously, Ridgecrest's main employer is the base, and all of the most of the jobs that exist out there are either directly or indirectly tied to the base. And I know that Chairman Peters is going to have probably a lot more to say about that. He knows more about the area than I do, obviously. Although my wife is from there and her family is about 100 strong in the Ridgecrest area, so I'm also familiar with it as well. Looking at the Mojave and Rosamond area, California City and Boron, in contrast, you have the Golden Queen mining, the borax mining with Rio Tinto, as I mentioned, Mojave Air and Spaceport, Edwards Air Force Base, and all of the renewable energy that encompasses it. So to say that the desert should all be one, the mountains should all be one, that isn't workable, it isn't logical, and we need to continue to have two districts in Eastern Kern. So I'm starting with our existing district maps, seeing how we can make some reasonable adjustments to balance out population and the other criteria we need to consider. So whether that is map A 2.0 or we're adjusting what's been proposed as map A with the changes that I suggested, that's the direction that I want to be proceeding in. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Those are my comments for now.
Thank you, Supervisor Scrivener. I want to just jump in there real quick as I represent the other East Kern district and echo a lot of the points that you made, especially when it comes to the base realignment, BRAC. We've seen how that process has played out over the years and the very real impact that could potentially have, especially as our country looks at decreasing certain defense funding. But I would like to share, before I get much further into my comments, just a few comments from some of the community leaders out in Ridgecrest and their thoughts on this. And one is a fantastic point, and this is from Mayor Eric Bruin from Ridgecrest. And he says a single proposed district for East Kern County would represent a minimum of 17 to 22 small cities, townships, and municipalities, and about half the landmass of Kern County will only have a single supervisor and their staff to represent constituents. Ridgecrest is the third largest city in Kern County. Each of the two larger cities in Kern County have one or more supervisors representing them, and Ridgecrest should have appropriate representation to its size. I would also like to refer to this letter from Scott O'Neill, who is the executive director of the Indian Wells Valley Economic Development Corporation, where he says, it's fair to acknowledge that urban issues are important and complex and that they have added pressure due to voice amplification. However, it is also fair to say that the issues facing the rural and remote areas are similarly complex, but associated with these is the added risk of sustainability. Drawing district boundaries that discourage dialogue or a fair discussion for all elements of the county is a disservice, and in this case could very well hinder the future economic viability and growth of the county. This means it should encourage open and fair dialogue on all the issues, designing the districts to best achieve these means by creating a balance that encourages dialogue around the clear and complete understanding and portrayals of these issues. And I believe specifically he's referring to the fact that under Plan A, our rural communities are represented by 3 districts in total, with 2 centered around Bakersfield, whereas under some of the proposed maps, 3 districts will be centered around Bakersfield, who will then obviously have a far outweighed influence on the board. And I believe that going that route and causing the vast majority of Kern County, well, basically all of our outlying areas outside of Bakersfield, to have decreased representation when they're already not incorporated cities that don't have as much of a voice, to take them from 3 supervisors down to 2 and diminish that voice even further, to me is not acceptable. Lastly, I would like to reference a letter from Dave Janis, who's the executive director of China Lake Alliance, where he discusses Kern County's longtime reliance on oil and agriculture and some of the changes that we're seeing in those industries, especially coming from the state right now, and trying to diversify so as to kind of decrease our dependence on those industries. And he says 2 of the most rapidly rising sectors in the national economy are technology and alternative renewable energy. These are the heart and strength of the 2 East Kern districts and need to be nurtured and expanded across the county, exactly as we are working towards with the B3K Prosperity Initiative. This high-tech workforce provided by China Lake, Edwards, the Mojave Air and Spaceport, and the renewable energy growth and employment opportunities, combined with all their support employment industries, represent the future for socioeconomic growth in Kern County, raising the standard of living for all groups. It is key that Kern County maintain adequate representation for the development of its future for all. So these are just a few of the reasons why I've received letters from constituents throughout the 1st District, including Kern River Valley, a large number of them from Ridgecrest and East Kern. These areas, while to some may seem easily lumped into one community of interest simply because it's on the other side of the mountains, or I think I've heard Supervisor Scrivener refer to it, the cactus curtain. It's easy to not appreciate the unique qualities of these communities until you're out there in them and participating and engaged in those communities. They really, truly are unique. And just going back to the difference in the branches for our bases out there, China Lake is so critical to national security that the federal government just invested $4 billion into it to repair the labs out there after the recent earthquake. It's the largest land holding in the United States Navy. It's the largest restricted airspace in the entire world, or for the U.S., I believe. Yeah, it's, I think 1.1 million acres is the size of the range out there. It's absolutely massive. And there's so much else that goes on at Edwards with aerospace, with the Air Force, and working with NASA and space travel. They're very different and both have, at times, competing interests. And so to lump those into one district where those bases rely very heavily on local representation, I think is, again, just not an acceptable outcome of this. So that's the bulk of my comments for right now. I may have something to throw in there later, but I'll get off my soapbox for a minute. Supervisor Maggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mitchell, could you give me a little bit of perspective on what are the absolute criteria that we must adhere to in order to adopt legal maps? And then are there some other criteria that could affect it but are not absolute, you must do this? must not do that. Can you give us any perspective on that?
Yeah,
Microphone's not on, sir.
I'll mention some things and go through some of the law that we interact with, and then I'll have Mr. Scannell highlight some of the other legal aspects that are more in his world. So first off, districts need to be equally populated. That's one of the first criteria, and it has to do with the fact that they need to be relatively equally populated. We have that 10% buffer. You need to follow the Federal Voting Rights Act, which Mr. Scannell can talk about. Districts need to be contiguous, so they have to be whole parts. You can't have a district, we've literally seen these in California, where it starts over here and then disappears and then pops up over here, and that's not legal anymore, or not legal really ever. The districts need to be compact, and that's kind of a relative thing, but it speaks to the idea that nearby areas should be joined together. You shouldn't bypass a nearby area to go snaking out somewhere to go grab something far away. And then there are other process-oriented things, like you have to have a certain number of hearings, you have to have information on your website. That information on your website needs to be public for 10 days, or for 10 years. The final map you adopt has to be public for 7 days before you adopt it. And other rules from the Fair Maps Act that must be followed as part of the process, so procedural elements to it. And then Mr. Scannell, if you want to speak to any of the VRA questions? Well, I'll just say communities and cities. Yeah. Again, in that criteria, recognizing communities of interest and where a community of interest can be identified, ensuring that it's placed in one district in order to maximize its ability to have representative and voting power. And then also to consider existing geographic boundaries like cities, census places, and ensuring that you're trying to reduce the number of splits of those communities. They both act as a geographic set piece in the redistricting process, but also oftentimes they are themselves a kind of community of interest. They might identify that, you know, this is my town, this is my community.
So which of these are subject to interpretation and which of them are absolute?
Well, I think one way of characterizing it is that some are really, really measurable, like a 10% deviation is very measurable. If you pass the plans by December 15th, that's measurable. There are those things, and there are other things that are either relative or up to interpretation. The Voting Rights Act is up to interpretation, although it has some elements that are measurable, like the majority-minority calculation.
Let's address that for just a moment to put that on the table. Under the Voter Rights Act, what is the requirement based upon is it census information about population and demographics? What is the requirement that we must meet with regard to the Voter Rights Act?
So I'll speak first just to the data piece, because the data we use is the citizen voting age population data. So when somebody says a district is majority-minority, it simply means that it is over 50% of one protected class. But then it comes to Chris's department when we interpret whether or not we're meeting the requirements of the Federal Voting Rights Act, specifically when we look at a potential district.
Yes, this is on, okay. Paul, could you bring up Plan C?
Sure.
Just so we can, because I appreciate you teeing this up, because I think it's a valuable point. I think to suggest that there's a hard, fast rule in the Voting Rights Act is unfortunately not the case. It's sort of a holistic analysis, unfortunately. As Paul points out, the first question is, can you draw a majority district that is a majority of the citizen voting age population for one group? And but that's just sort of a first cut. If you can't get over 50%, then that's the end of the inquiry. But if you can, then there are additional steps. And then the question becomes, are those voters politically cohesive? Do they vote together? And are they routinely outvoted by voters from other groups? And so it becomes sort of a case-by-case analysis to some extent. And the reason I asked Paul to bring this up is I think it's important is if you look at this map, you have in the abstract 3 50% Latino citizen voting age population.
Are you looking at a map or are you looking at a spreadsheet?
I'm looking at a spreadsheet here on the screen.
For a second, I thought I didn't know the difference. Okay.
Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, it's late in the day. Anyway, so if you look, you see the red boxes there at the bottom. You have 3 districts here that are over 50% Latino citizen voting age population. So that's the first cut, right? That's the first question. But if you look at the case law, it really focuses, it recognizes that just because you're over that 50% number doesn't necessarily mean that that is an effective opportunity district for that group. In particular because the Latino population in California specifically tends to have lower registration rates and lower turnout rates than other groups. And so, if you look historically at those numbers, that 50, those numbers tend to drop off by approximately 10 to 15% in a primary election, which is when the board is elected. So a 54% Latino citizen voting age district, as we have in District 5 there, might be more like a 40% turnout district. And that's not necessarily going to be an opportunity to elect district. And so the complicated question here becomes, how do you, obviously all of this is being done in the shadow of the Luna case. And the court determined that there had to be those 2 majority Latino districts. When we were working with MALDEF on the settlement for this plan, they were adamant that those districts needed to be in the ballpark of 65% Latino citizen voting age population. Because they were concerned about the lower registration and the lower turnout. And so I have a concern that, and an additional point, the districts aren't fungible, right? In other words, you can't say, well, we've undercut District 4 as a Latino citizen voting age district, but we've created this other one elsewhere in the county. There's Supreme Court case law that says that's not okay. So you have to look at each of these individual districts, and I have some concern in this map, for example, that going from, I think the current District 4 is about 64% Latino citizen voting age population down to under 54, that's a problem. That you've undercut that district as a viable Latino citizen voting age district. And so you asked a simple question, what's the absolute? I wish I could give you a simple answer. It's sort of a case-by-case analysis. I would note that for the maps that we currently have, all of those maps except Plan A drop District 4 under 60% Latino citizen voting age population.
Can you say that last sentence again, please?
I said for all of the maps except Plan A, they drop District 4 under 60% Latino citizen voting age population.
All of the other maps drop it below the level that you think passes muster?
Well, below the level that MALDEF thought passed muster. And so and then the extent to which they drop it below varies. And so I guess my level of concern with the maps varies accordingly, but all of the maps except that Plan A do reduce that number substantially by 5% or more. And so there's a concern, and according, it's going to reduce registration and turnout rates accordingly as well. And so I have some concern that there's going to be voting rights issues by reducing those numbers in that district.
That's very helpful. Do the numbers in the census, could either of you please respond to this? Do the numbers in the census that we have before us compel us to have a 3rd voter rights district in Kern County?
In my view, the answer is no, because I don't believe you can do it in a way that maintains the 2 current districts at levels that are effective Latino opportunity districts. In other words, getting to that 3rd district requires you to undercut the 2 that already exist, and in the process you may end up with none that are effective majority Latino opportunity districts. And so, if that were possible, if it were possible to do that, that might be another question. But having reviewed the numbers pretty closely and having seen the draft maps that have come out, I don't think that is not only required, but I think it's potentially risky.
Mr. Mitchell, thank you for that. Mr. Mitchell, what do you think about that?
I think that this is something that we find throughout California, that the Latino population oftentimes need to have a significantly higher than 50% population in order for them to be an effective district for that community. And so Mr. Scannell is actually, his firm has done the research with another demographer to really dive into this data. And so if his study shows that, and I think you should trust him.
If Supervisor Perez wants to make a comment, I'm happy to do that. I'll come back to my questions when she's done.
Mike, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's okay. I don't mind pausing.
Thank you for the dialogue. You know, I'll say that I personally, as one individual up here, would not recommend going below the 64 that we have in District 4. That was fought for very hard by MALDEF. It was not given up easy by this county. We fought for Kern County, and we did that appropriately and legally, both Zach and I, representing the county. And those are tricky issues, obviously. But the CVAP that was produced in District 4 is an exceptional CVAP, in my opinion, given what I have seen and experienced. You see that district elected a different supervisor, or their current supervisor, which is their right. They did so legally, and we move on from that election. But the idea of dropping below 60 or even 64, to me, I just think is a travesty. For one, how hard it was fought for. And perhaps the folks that are doing this can call MALDEF and have a separate conversation. I don't think it should be me. But nonetheless, I think that's an incredible CVAP. And if there's going to be a viable Latino elected, or maybe a different minority elected, or even a different white elected, that district meaningfully can do, it's going to be with a CVAP of 64. And I think, interestingly enough, Latinos have demonstrated, at least here, a propensity to vote for all kinds of candidates, which I think is really cool. You know, if that's a good elected, and clearly the supervisor was reelected, that's how our elections work. And we move on. But I think losing 60, anything below 60, I think is totally insane. But going below 64, you know, to me personally, while it's not my decision, you know, would really be a travesty, given how hard 64 was to acquire. That was not a given. Kern County aggressively fights for its interests, as it should, and that was a really hard-fought conclusion. And you know, I'll just leave that for your consideration. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome. So that what she just said about the diluting District 4 below 60, 65%, wouldn't that same argument hold for District 5?
Well, I think the threshold, given the historical effectiveness of District 5, it may not be 65, it might be 63. Okay. You know, but essentially the same broad brush argument applies.
Is that because it has a history of having elected a Latino?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
And Mike, you know, it's sort of an established district. It feels like when people think of the 5th, they think that it's the Latino district, if you will. Yeah. It's sort of culturally
Rubio, Parra, it's been that way for a long time.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, you know, I just think culturally, so I'm much more comfortable with the CVAP in 5 of 55, for example. Or, you know, I think mine right now is even lower than that, because we had to do that in order to make D4 a compelling district in its makeup. We had to give up, because folks tend to self-segregate. They tend to live in their own neighborhoods, and that's the way that played out. And so I gave that up, having been an established district, frankly, Mike. Why I thought that was okay when we were negotiating is because we're established, and you know, I've been there for some time. But certainly as that district turns over, as every district will, I will not be there forever. Nobody will be in their districts forever. You know, those are political considerations that are really hard to manage, and they're really hard to predict, as you know. And you know, the elections themselves are pretty unpredictable. But you know, with those factors, it's interesting. So, you know, those are just some of my humble thoughts. I shared those thoughts with the Dolores Huerta group when we met, and we looked at the equity map. We've met one time. I did not make any promises, of course. I was concerned about the geographic coverage being so huge, right? I mean, because I remembered last time it was even smaller than that, and it was an issue. So I raised that, and also raised the CVAP issue, and just how critical I think CVAP in D4 it should be higher, if possible, but if not, it certainly shouldn't be lower. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are some who have risen and said, one person in particular said something kind of provocative, that we were the bad boys, sorry, Letitia, the bad boys of voter rights issues, and made it, there's certainly, I took the implication was that, you know, if we don't follow the map he drew, that we were doing something inappropriate. So if the map that we currently have were to be adopted without any change, does it fit within these parameters?
Well, I think pretty close, because I think the Voting Rights Act is driving a lot of this, and obviously we just had this judgment 3 years ago. I think there are some minor changes along the edges to unify. They're sort of in the outerlying areas. There are some cities and census-designated places that were divided because they followed major roads, and sometimes cities, are on both sides of a road. But that is something kind of minor tweaks as opposed to major wholesale revisions.
And clearly there is the issue of equalizing population, raw population.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
That's
Mr. Mitchell, do you have any, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was going to say that's the number one consideration in all of this.
Mr. Mitchell, do you have any view different than that?
No, I'll just add that while I respect the speaker who came up and spoke in regards to that, it's in California, any agency that's following the Fair Maps Act can't be labeled the bad boy of redistricting in this country.
That's a relief.
The Fair Maps Act and the way that you're following it, making sure that you're having more than the required number of hearings, the way that you're engaging with the public, the fact that you're thinking so much about the Voting Rights Act, and the fact that you're doing this on the heels of a major transition in your lines as a result of just a few years ago, I think that you are you're looking pretty good to me.
4 bad boys and 1 girl.
Okay.
Bad or otherwise.
You're not bad at all, so it's not no bad.
I'm just kidding.
If the Supervisor Scrivener suggested the possibility of a rather simple remedy, which was that, remember that inverted triangle, and if all of the adjustments were made there, is this issue of a census designated area an issue in that area because it's, I believe that area or most of it is within the boundaries of the city of Bakersfield. How does that play into this situation?
So, yeah, I believe that particular area is within the boundaries of Bakersfield. So it doesn't divide any city or census designated place except maybe Bakersfield itself, which inevitably has to be. I was focused more on some of the more outlying areas, like the current district, the current line between District 4 and 2, there in the little north of the Taft area. There are a couple of small CDPs there that are divided, and we're talking about a small amount of population. It would be a very easy fix just to unify those. Those are the types of discrete minor changes that I'm talking about that I think the Fair Maps Act suggests should be done. But as I said, I'm not talking about wholesale revision. I'm talking about a few people here and there just to unify those areas.
As I looked at the alternative A that Mr. Mitchell's firm came up with, it made many different changes to many different areas of the district boundaries. When the suggestion that Supervisor Scrivener made seems to be much more simple than that. And if simple is satisfactory, I prefer simple because it's easier to explain and understand. And but I want it to be fair. So, Mr. Mitchell, as you come back to us with the map that Supervisor Scrivener has asked you to do, I agree with him that is something I'd like to see, and to see if that can be, if the population issue can be remedied, and we can just to know how compelling the current district slightly adjusted like that would be. If that indeed meets the criteria. One last thing, it is clear that many people, it is clear to me anyway, that many people are very passionate about this. Yeah. Some people, as I have researched what criteria the court might use to review these issues, there are magic little buzzwords in there that people use. And some who have stood at this microphone have been very careful to use specific words I think, to make their points. There are other people who are just as well-meaning, but they have risen and have spoken without the benefit of having known what those words are, those hot words that stand in the letter of the law as to what the criteria should be. So how do we weigh those kinds of comments back and forth? How do you suggest that we weigh them? What's the legal what legal burden do I have to weigh them?
Well, I mean, I think you take all of it, you take all of the testimony, and you take that and you combine it with the fact that you know your communities as well. You know, because you represent them, you know these areas. And, you know, the fact that statements about communities of interest or any of these criteria aren't necessarily put in that language doesn't mean you ignore them or disregard them as a result of that. You understand what the communities of interest are. And to the extent they tie into that, you have some discretion and some ability to weigh those considerations and make an appropriate judgment. I mean, it doesn't, I guess the long way of saying, there don't have to be magic words for you to understand what they're talking about. And ultimately, you are the decision makers.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm good. Thank you for your responses, both of you.
Thank you, Supervisor Maggard. Supervisor Couch.
Thank you. Well, let me get this out of the way. I don't know who this question is actually for. Sir, you spoke about the Equity Coalition map. It might be for you, or it might be for someone engaged in that.
Thank you.
Can I pose the question to you?
Well, I think you are talking about Mr. Garcia, who
Yes.
I think he's not in the audience.
Oh, did he leave?
Yeah,
he just.
I'm sorry. I thought he had the blue shirt on right there.
I think he might have, but a different blue shirt.
Well, I'll ask him the next time he comes. Can you talk to me about the timeline that I've forgotten. When do we have to have this done by? How many more hearings are there?
Yeah, the drop dead, maybe I shouldn't use that word, the absolute, the absolute end of the timeline under the Elections Code is December 15th.
Okay.
We have scheduled, we've built in a bit of a cushion. And
we need to adopt something by that date.
That's right.
Okay.
As I said, we built in a bit of a cushion, and so we have 2 more hearings scheduled, one for November 2nd, 8th, I'm sorry, I'm doing enough different jurisdictions, they all blur together. November 8th, and then the last one for November 16th. The idea being that should it become necessary, we have an extra meeting in there.
Okay. This is some motivation for you all. I can recall doing this at the city of Bakersfield 10 years ago, and we could, instead of just bringing back a map, which I'm happy for you to do, like Supervisor Scrivener described, but can we have a real-time ability to say to you, for example, what if you move that line here or this line there, and click, let's see what the population does, what the demographics does. Can we set that up for our next meeting, that we can see it right in front of us?
I don't know what the technological capacity is for that, but the one
we can do it online.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that is the advantage that we have over 10 years ago, is that now anybody can go online and do exactly that. So you're not limited to just sort of doing it real time in a single limited time frame. People can do it over the course of the next couple of weeks. You could do it over the course of the next couple of weeks. Anybody
I understand, but can we do it at a meeting? Can we sit here and say just some of the stuff, the minor things you described between districts 2 and 4? Like if we move those, what would that do to the population? Can we do that in real time so people can see?
I can, just so you know, it's there might be technological barriers for me to be able to, on your IT system, get into the mapping software, but I'm actually on the mapping software on my computer right now. It's just a matter of displaying it.
So you're using something different than what's on our website?
Yeah, I'm using the actual Maptitude software.
Okay.
And I'm using a remote server into my home server so that I can do that. So I could, as an example, answer questions within a few minutes of asking. Like as an example, Mr. Scannell mentioned the fact that he wanted to make sure all the census places weren't split. So I just ran a report to ensure that Plan A, there are 88 census places, and the only one that is split is Bakersfield. So
I think doing it using our website is adequate.
Oh, using the districtor? We could use that too.
Okay.
We could use that too. It just wouldn't be the professional software, wouldn't be the actual software that we're using to draw the lines, but we could answer questions using districtor.
Is it Mr. Garcia? I have a question for you. regarding the Equity Coalition's map. I'm just curious. I find this interesting. You drew the map, but you drew it with a bunch of input from lots of people and groups.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We have had regular meetings for months.
Gotcha.
And at those meetings, I get told, Jesus, move this, move that, this has to go here, that's, yeah.
So it's not your fault, is what you're telling me, right? Okay.
This is a collective map, Mr. Couch, of the community.
So how did it happen that every one of us were drawn out of our districts except Supervisor Perez?
The data.
The data.
The data. I went strictly.
Well, no. Now we're talking about. I think you can come up with a map, but I think you could still use different numbers on the different districts that you come up with. That would have kept Supervisor Scribner in his district, for example, or would have kept me in it.
Well, again, it's under the Fair Maps Act, and I think under sort of the new mandates of drawing maps it's a blind process. And so, as you recall, or you may know,
absolute luck of the draw is how this happened.
Absolutely, yes. The maps are drawn blindly, and in fact, I'm doing several maps up and down the valley. I don't know if you've heard.
Sure.
And in many of those, I didn't know where people lived, and so I'm being accused of.
I actually don't know where they live either. Definitively.
Well, I know where you live in general, and I kind of know where the Supervisor, Perez lives, but I kind of know where you in general lived. But again, that had nothing to do with the criteria.
Gotcha.
It's strictly on statistics and data.
Thank you.
It's VRA.
Thank you very much.
Supervisor, I'd let them know too that I would not be running for the Board of Supervisors again. So the maps will not impact me.
Thank you. Yes. We are doing this under the sort of the shadow of the Luna case. And
that's right.
So, and I do believe also that some of the comments that have been made, this is to Supervisor Maggart's point, are not a direct threat of litigation, but I would term it sort of an implied threat. And so I want to make sure that what we have on the record when we have these hearings is accurate. You said something a moment ago that the primary elections are when the board is elected. So that can be if you only have two candidates, but you'll have I just want to put on the record that you also have runoff elections in November.
Of course,
okay.
Of course.
And I wanted to get a definition of this. When someone said that you needed a percentage higher than, and I don't remember the percentage, for the district to be effective. What did you mean? What does the word effective mean in that case?
It means that Latino voters in that district have an equal opportunity to elect their preferred candidates. And so it's a district that meets the test of the Voting Rights District. No, I'm sorry, the Voting Rights Act. And so, we walked through the example where some of those districts were like 54% Latino citizen voting age population, but they are because of the registration and turnout drop-offs.
Okay.
They're not necessarily going to have the ability to elect their preferred candidates, even given that bare majority.
Have you contemplated, or do you have a thought on if we have all mail-in balloting, and which we didn't have before, and now we have ballot harvesting, which we didn't have a few years ago.
Sure.
Does that change your calculation on the effectiveness?
Yeah, over time it might, but not. The courts won't look at sort of like one election and make their judgment on that. So the recent history still is, and I went back and I looked at 2020. So when I say recent history, I mean recent history.
Okay.
Is that at least at the primary that year, the drop-off was in the 10 to 15% range. Now, I think that the mail-in ballots is the sort of thing that could make that gap narrow, and maybe very quickly. But at least as things stand right now, the information that we have, there's still that gap.
Okay. Thank you for your help.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Couch. Are there any other questions or comments from the board at this time?
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, guess right now, Kathy, Ms. Kress, do we need a motion on this, or is it just we have provided direction through those comments?
I would defer to County Council.
Okay. Sorry. Ms. Rezon?
Chairman Peters, at this time we are asking for direction from your board. The way that we've put it in the board letter is provide direction to staff and the demographer consultant to revise and refine the initial draft district maps. So that's what we're seeking.
Okay. So
if there's more specific direction you want to give, this would be the time. Or
say that again. Say what you just said again, the recommended action.
The recommended action was to open the public hearing and receive public comment, et cetera. Then provide direction to staff and the demographer consultant to revise and refine initial draft district maps.
Do you think you have adequate direction? I mean, I think you heard from Supervisor Scrivener to bring back what he was asking for. I was asking you to bring back the ability for us to, just with our website, to make some changes and see how it would impact it. Do you need more than that?
As long as the board is, yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Anybody got anything else?
Exactly.
Yeah, that sounds like it's.
Do you want that in a motion?
Yes.
I'll say the word "so moved." And
would you repeat it one time, David? Just I think I was.
The motion is the recommendation by County Council to include the map that Supervisor Scrivener requested, and the ability next time we do this to be able to manipulate. Wrong word. Elected people should never say the word manipulate. To utilize the county website in drawing maps in real time.
And if I could clarify, that's in addition to the provide direction to the staff and the demographer consultant to revise and refine, including the map requested by Supervisor Scrivener, yes. And your request for real-time drawing ability.
Yes. I think we're in violent agreement.
I have one more question. Just I don't know. This might be a question for Mr. Garcia. Might be a question for any gentleman. But the map D, that is the latest revision, so to speak, of the Equitable Coalition, and that's their newest iteration of that map that is being put forward. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so under that direction, that's provided by the board, that would be map A 2.0, and that same map, or that's what would be brought back to the board. Am I understanding that correctly?
So the current map A, the revised map A, I believe does the most recent map supersede your prior map?
Yes, we had a preliminary map, and then we had one with the DOJ data, and then this one was done in consultation with our folks along the river.
Okay.
So I think map B, because it was based on the earlier version, sounds like it would be superseded.
Okay.
And then map C, as I said, I have some concerns about that one from a voting rights perspective. So.
Understood. Supervisor
Are
Price.
you guys communicating? I mean, just so you can at least be on the same page about, it would mean a lot to me personally if you gave these people your time of day and help them understand the methodology or whatever you think they're not getting. I mean, I think it would be helpful.
I'm happy to talk to them, of course.
Okay.
I do believe that they've also been talking with Mr. Mitchell too. So.
Oh, okay. Well, you said no, so I mean, you did your head no, so I'm just going on what you're telling me.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I am the contract C, if you will. So
Okay.
Lowering the boss.
Okay. I just think we
just-
accomplish a lot when we talk to each other.
Of course.
Just for the record, we haven't communicated about the Kern maps other than to share shape files.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate clearing that up.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's clear as mud now, but I think we have a motion from Supervisor Couch. Do we have a second? To bring back the... Second. Okay, great. Have a motion, a second. Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Great, thank you. Okay, I misplaced my agenda, but I believe that was our last item. And our next meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Grass, would be November 8th at 6 p.m.
Yes, Monday, November 8th
For a
at 6
special
p.m.
redistricting meeting.
And it's the entire meeting is redistricting.
Okay, great. So we'll, if there is no objection, if we can get a motion to adjourn until November 8th at 6 p.m.
So moved.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
To the ground. The system is